Good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting here on August 27th, 2018. And if you would please join us with the Pledge of Allegiance. I believe we have we have a guest this evening to lead us in the pledge.
Good
Ms.
evening.
Martin.
I'm Kristen Martin from T.A. Laurie Elementary School, and I have with me Zoe Henderson, who is a 5th grade student at T.A. Laurie. She's an outstanding student. She demonstrates many of the character traits of honesty and trustworthiness and caring, so we are very proud to have Zoe represent T.A. Laurie today. Her mother, Mrs. Henderson, is here as well. So you ready, Zoe?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Second board meeting in a row with a full house. This is excellent. We're going to get used to this. If there's no objection, I would like to make a motion this evening to switch the order of our agenda a little bit and move the public comment first and then have the presentation after that and then continue with the rest of our board meeting, which is our mission of things to do as education. So what we'd like to do is start with the public speakers, reminding you again that you have 3 minutes to speak. Ms. Ogden, would you mind timing?
You need to actually take a vote of the board
to change the agenda. All right.
Would you make the motion?
Is there a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right. Just as a side note also, last time we had a board meeting, we had quite a bit of public comment, and we greatly appreciated that everybody was very polite and kind and well-behaved. So I hope and anticipate that it goes as smoothly as last time. So I would just appreciate just the respect of being here and coming to speak. So, all right. The first up is Nancy Gregory, and after Nancy, we have John Doyle.
At the Shepherdstown Town Council presentation and question and answer, Mr. Ogilvy presented Rockwell Industry as being mostly innocuous and presented the company as being a good community neighbor. In light of that, I asked if he would be willing to get independent economic and environmental impact studies, and based on those results, if he would set aside a fund to pay for pollution-related damages over time and pay for damage prevention measures in the meanwhile. I also asked if he would provide psychological support and grief counseling for those of us whose lives will be profoundly and negatively impacted by his industry. It required a yes or a no answer. Despite asking 4 times, his answer was only that he was providing environmental information to the Board of Education. That was what I would expect from a politician who doesn't want to answer a question, not a good community neighbor with a low-impact business that would have nothing to hide. So what I got from his answer is that no, he's not willing to take responsibility for Rockwell's pollution-related damages to our physical and psychological health, economic stability, and our land. Good community members don't infuse themselves under a veil of deceit and lies. You will never be accepted in this community, Rockwell, and we won't ever back down. The opposition will only continue to grow, and thanks to the era of the internet, word about Rockwell's toxic industry and deceitful business practices will spread to every environmental group in the country, no matter what code name you use. In the big picture, your industry is contributing to climate change, and it would benefit our planet if you changed your industry to a different type of insulation. Look to the present and the future and help make the planet a better place. In the meanwhile, your presence here in Jefferson County is a disaster and will always be abhorred. There were 2 questions that I didn't get to ask when I was there. One question is, if the stuff coming out of your smokestacks is so innocuous, like ambient air, as you say, Why do you need 220-foot smokestacks? Why don't you just vent it out of regular chimneys or out of vents in the house, in the building? And the second thing is, if I gave you first thing in the morning with each meal, and then with each meal, and a few times in between meals and at bedtime, and then woke you up in the middle of the night a few times and gave you a glass of juice with a little bit of arsenic, but mostly juice, would you ingest that? Sir, that is the equivalent of what you are asking us to do. Pollution 24/7 with irreversible and cumulative effects that will be lethal for many. There are times in history that wrong decisions are made. At Flint, Michigan, somebody made the decision to divert the water and poison thousands of people with lead. We are at a point right now where we can go one way and we can make a decision that is going to be devastating. We know the results. Or we can say, no, we're not going to go down that road, no matter what the consequences. And I think it behooves all of us to make the right decision and get rid of these people. Thank you.
Mr. Doyle, before you start speaking, let me just remind everybody that public comment is for the public to address the board. We do have guests here in the room, and it's not really the time or place for the comments to be addressed to them. It's to be addressed to us. So if you wouldn't mind just adjusting your comments however need be. And then after Mr. Doyle, we have Daniel Kazera.
Madam President and members of the Board of Education, thank you for having this hearing. I'm John Doyle. I live in Shepherdstown, and I oppose Rockwell. I think the biggest reason that Jefferson County is in the pickle it's in right now is that West Virginia's environmental laws are seriously weak, way too weak, and have been administered in the last year or so in the weakest manner possible. There was no public hearing in Jefferson County prior to Rockwell being granted its air quality permit. And that's why you have thousands of people who were blindsided by the fact that there appears to be some pollution. And I don't think any of this was your fault. I'm convinced that none of it was your fault. The Secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection, Austin Caperton, even though no one requested a public hearing, had the authority to order a public hearing in Jefferson County anyway. And I would have thought with a 200-foot high smokestack, that would have been a no-brainer. He chose not to do it. So here we are. I oppose Rockwell not only because of what it's going to do to our air. I'm in favor of jobs for Jefferson County, and I'm in favor of factory jobs, but not factory jobs that pollute. We have tremendous potential for increased jobs in tourism and in agriculture and in other areas, and I'm afraid something like Rockwell is going to chase those jobs away. We will end up with net fewer jobs as a result of Rockwell coming. So all I ask you is, please do whatever you can to help us stop Rockwell from coming here. Thank you.
Daniel Kazera, and then Lou Perlman.
Good evening. Thank you for taking the time to have us, giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. My name's Dan Kazera. I've been a Jefferson County resident for close to 30 years. My wife and I have raised 5 children here, and I've had a business here for more than 25 years. You know, I've followed the Rockwell controversy since it became public. There's been a lot of technical information provided by both sides, and there's been numerous interpretations and analysis of all of that. And quite honestly, I'm not smart enough to understand almost any of it. But what has become very obvious to me is the repeated use of 2 phrases: acceptable levels of and risk assessment of. The dictionary defines acceptable as able to be agreed on or suitable, able to be tolerated or allowed, suitable, tolerated, or allowed. The EPA website, quote, says there are many definitions of the word risk. but the EPA considers risk to be the chance of harmful effects to humans or ecological systems. The chance. So why are we, and more importantly you, the school board, at a place where there even needs to be a consideration of the suitable levels of pollution for the children of Jefferson County? Why do you need to decide the risk, the chance of harmful effects on the school children? Another way for me to more simply understand all of this was to apply these same standards, same measures to the policy the board already has to protect school children. So think about it this way. What is the acceptable level of drug and alcohol use allowed in Jefferson County schools? What amount of bullying is suitable in our schools? What amount of risk of school violence do you accept for the children? Think about this carefully. Strip away the facts, the formulas, the promises you may hear. Each of you have the responsibility, the burden, to decide what is acceptable for the children of Jefferson. And you decide the risk they must live under. Do what is right for the children. Decide there is zero tolerance for even the chance of harmful effects. Decide there is zero tolerance, no acceptable level of pollution for the children of Jefferson County. Thank you.
Next, we have Lou Perliman, followed by Tracy Cannon.
Hello, my name is Lou Perliman, and I have written to each of you recently, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to speak to you directly tonight. Jefferson County is an extraordinary place, sitting as it does between the rivers and among the hills, and the county and its towns form an extraordinary community. Like so many parents and grandparents here, we came to Jefferson County for our family. Our children grew up here in this strong, supportive community. They were educated here, and then they went, inevitably, out into the world to learn more and to accomplish great things. And then they came back. Out in the world, they learned that Jefferson County is the very place they want to be. And I can look around this room and see a number of young people who had that same experience. Our young people choose to return to Jefferson County to live and raise their families, to start businesses, and to contribute to the community that helped raise them. Jefferson County Schools has benefited from that desire. You know how many teachers in our schools were once students at North Jefferson, T.A. Lowry, Blue Ridge, South Jefferson, Page Jackson, C.W. Shipley, Ranson, Shepherdstown Elementary and Middle, Wright Denny, Charlestown Middle and Harpers Ferry, Jefferson High, and more recently, Drisswood, Wildwood Middle, and Washington High. You, as the members of the school board, have the ability to change the present course of action that is set to endanger our students and transform forever the quality of life in our county and throughout our region. It is not too late to rectify that mistake. Our next generation, attending our schools right now, will learn right here, Mortington Avenue, from you, the most important lesson that they will ever learn about taking responsibility for your actions and being an engaged and responsible citizen. Thank you.
After Tracy Cannon, we have Nathaniel Hitt.
Hello, and thank you, Board of Education, for hearing us this evening. I just wanted to say I've been with this group of people for about a month now. We've been turning out for meeting after meeting, day after day, showing up, speaking our minds, and people have been doing this at their own expense. People have been disrupting their families and just devoting their entire lives, really, to coming to these meetings and talking to people like yourselves. And we appreciate that the community of elected officials here is hearing us. But I want to say something today about these nice gentlemen also who have come here. They are paid PR people. They come here as part of their salary. They are trained. They have a canned presentation they're going to give you here in a few minutes that we've all seen 5 times now about how safe their plant is. The rest of us here in this room, we don't believe that. And I ask you to put more weight on our words. We're speaking from the heart. We're sacrificing income and our time to do this. This is not our job. We're not professionals. These gentlemen are professionals, and they are being paid to tell you what they're going to tell you. And that really should say it all. All of us in this room who are not being paid are speaking from our hearts. And our words should have 10 times the weight of the words that come from those who are doing it for money. Thank you.
And after Nathaniel, we have Mary Ellen Ross.
Is there a microphone? Good evening. My name is Nathaniel Hitt. My nickname is Than, and I live at 209 West Washington Street in Shepherdstown. I appreciate your time tonight. I appreciate you listening. And I have 3 asks of you. But first, let me say that I'm a parent of a student in the Jefferson County School Board system. She's in 3rd grade. I'm concerned about her future here, and I'm looking for leadership from you. There are many parents with us tonight, and we're all concerned about what our children, how our children are going to grow, how our children are going to thrive. This is a big decision. It's one that touches all of us, and I appreciate you taking that to heart. There are 3 asks I'd like to make of you tonight, and I think they're all very much reasonable and within your leadership roles. First, I'd ask that you rescind the pilot agreement that you've agreed to with Rockwell. And that's because new information has arisen, and it's because you weren't provided with the sufficient information from day one. If you look at the meeting minutes, it's clear that you were asking for information, and I appreciate that. But you weren't provided with the information necessary to make an informed decision. And as you gain that information, it's completely reasonable for you to change your mind, to make a new decision based on the new information that's been provided. That's completely reasonable, and I ask that you rescind the pilot agreement that you've developed. That's my first point. My second point is more personal. You all are in leadership positions. Our community is entrusting you with this leadership role, and so we need to hear from you on an individual basis whether or not you believe this siting is correct, whether or not you believe this is the correct siting for a smokestack and a facility of this sort. It would be impossible to imagine it'd be criminal to build a school so near a smokestack like this. Why would we consider the opposite? So my second ask of you tonight is that you individually register your opinion as a leader in this community, whether or not this facility is acceptably sited. And my third ask of you tonight is for information on the current lay of the land, the status of North Jefferson Elementary School. I'm concerned about fugitive dust moving off the site and onto the school site. Children may be exposed to heavy metals coming from soil on the site, being moved into the air and deposited on North Jefferson Elementary School. Of course, we know that the orchard site has a legacy of using pesticides, copper, arsenic, other toxins. So I'd ask that you investigate that and report back to the community, and I thank you for your time.
And after Mary Ellen Ross, we have Mary Matledge.
Hello, and thank you very much for listening to us all. I am a parent here in Jefferson County and have raised 2 girls here through the Jefferson County school systems, and they really enjoyed it, and, they're doing well. But I have been reading a few documents and statements, and one of the things that I noticed is that the JCDA plans to provide potable water to North Jefferson Elementary from the system that will be serving the Rockwell plant. And I just want to make sure that you are aware of this change to the school's infrastructure and have allowed for any additional costs that will be incurred due to this change. And also, if you feel that you were misled into signing the pilot agreement, please get some good legal help and get out of the agreement. Rockwell is definitely not good for our children or for our county. Thank you again.
And after Ms. Matledge, we have Laurie Malone.
Hello. Thank you very much for having us here and allowing us to speak and discuss this really important issue for Jefferson County. I'm originally from the area. I moved back to Jefferson County a couple of years ago from California, and one of my main reasons for choosing Jefferson County was that there was no industry here. I was living in an area that was adversely affected by climate change and forest fires, and I wanted to come back to a place that was rural and safe for my asthmatic lungs. The recent revelation that this multinational corporation is coming into Carneysville to build an industrial facility is extremely disturbing. The fact that it will operate within a 2-mile radius of 4 schools is exceedingly disturbing. The factory is in direct conflict with the vision residents have had for Jefferson County in their envisioned statement. It was to create green spaces to preserve our biodynamic agriculture, our organic farms, our orchards, our horse industry, and industries that bring a tremendous amount of revenue to this county, which far surpasses any kind of financial benefit that Rockwell will bring. It leaves our children at extreme risk of developing respiratory illnesses, cancer. The 21-story smokestack will be emitting 9 categories of pollutants, including formaldehyde, which is a dangerous neurotoxin that could adversely affect children's development. It will be the second largest emitter of volatile organic compounds in the state. Those adverse effects may take time to manifest. However, the immediate effects will also endanger the children and interfere with their learning environment. There will be heavy tractor trailers loaded with rock all day, every day, causing damage to the roads, dust, and a noise distraction and interference that will place right near where children may be outside. So this is extremely damaging to the learning environment. And I'm saying this as a professor. I taught for 25 years at the University of San Francisco. I don't appreciate some of the condescending remarks that have been made by Rockwell representatives, which to me indicate that they have nothing but disdain for this community. I think it's a very, very bad deal. I would urge you all to please reconsider this and oppose this project, or at least delay it until a full environmental impact study could be made, certainly a cost-benefit analysis as well, which I don't think has ever been done. So I urge you to please stop these people from putting this toxic factory in our beautiful, beautiful county. Thank you.
And after Laurie, we have Will Sutherland.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Laurie Malone, and I am a Carneysville resident. I have a son who's 2, and in 3 years, he will attend North Jefferson Elementary School. He might be outside watching right now. Hi, Connor. I want him to go to school in a place that's safe. But I'm not here to talk about safety tonight. I want him to be part of a community. I want him to grow up in a community that's thriving, and I want him to be part of that community and to be proud of it. And I want him to believe in the power of democracy. And I've become increasingly concerned that the democratic process wasn't followed here. Our citizens have not been able to have the voice through this process that they should have. I'm an administrator in the Citizens Concerned About Rockwell group, and also secretary of our new nonprofit, Jefferson County Vision. Our Facebook group has over 8,800 people in it. And our last primary in Jefferson County, there were 8,818 ballots cast. Our group has now exceeded the number of ballots cast in the last primary in the county. And I only mention that to say that I believe we as a group have power, and we will have your backs. I know this is a difficult position that you're in, and I am asking you to pull out of the pilot agreement. We will have your backs if you do that. Please do the right thing. How was this presented to you? Did you have all of the right facts that you needed to make that decision? We believe that you did not. Pull out of the pilot agreement. Were you swayed by the idea that utilities might be provided to North Jefferson and other schools that have yet to be built? I can tell you, as somebody that has worked with local governments and agencies to find money, there is money to be found for those sorts of projects. And I know it's not easy, but we can help find that happen, make that happen. There are ways to make that happen. So again, please, I ask you, how do you feel about this process? How do you feel about your involvement, and where do you stand personally? Is this the right location for Rockwell's factory? Please do the right thing. Thank you.
And after Will, we have Katie Mextra.
I had a dream last night that Rockwell released a statement saying, out of great respect for the citizens of Jefferson County, West Virginia, we have decided not to build our new factory in Rancid. Jefferson County is a beautiful and historic place with an incredible community, and although we would love to be a part of it, we have listened, watched, and determined our factory simply does not align with the direction Jefferson County is growing. We hope to locate in an area more suitable for our footprint, and we will continue our dedication to putting our customers first in every way. That's just a dream. But I feel like that dream was positive because I've spoken to most of the people here from Rockwell, and they are very nice people. But their company is just not a good fit for this county at this point. Maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, but not now. My name is Will Sutherland. I'm the oldest of 3 brothers. All of us attended school from kindergarten through 12th grade here in Jefferson County. I still keep in touch with Dr. Nichols, Rob Perks, and many of my good teachers. My youngest brother just earned his master's in public health from Johns Hopkins and is starting work with the CDC in Atlanta next week. My middle brother is a professor at Shepherd, and I work as a media production specialist and also own and operate the highest rated Airbnb in the state. My mother taught at Blue Ridge and T.A. Lowry for the majority of her short life, and the first time I really understood how much she cared about the kids and her job was when I saw her crying after she heard about T.A. Lowry being broken into and all the computers being smashed. She was devastated. Needless to say, we value our education from this county, and I thank you for putting the children first, as I trust you will do with this epic decision. Financially, I feel like this is not a wise choice. To quote Councilman Mike Brittingham, quote, "The math just doesn't benefit the county. The pilot agreement reduces their taxes to $2.03 million over the course of 10 years. Based on the $150 million that Rockwell advertises they're spending, their taxes over that period would have been at least $25.65 million. That's a loss of $23.62 million in county revenue just for 150 jobs. Demographically, our county is nothing like the other counties where they have factories. Marshall County, Mississippi has a 4.3% unemployment rate, 37,000 citizens, and 710 square miles. Jefferson County, we have an awesome 3.4 unemployment rate, 54,000 citizens, and only 212 square miles. So when I flew out of Martinsburg with my dad, I immediately saw the construction site at 1,300 feet. It's giant. Rockwell wouldn't have been nice if you guys, sorry to address him personally, if Rockwell had been if they had been told that the public was not for this in the first place, they probably would not have been wasting their time coming here. And then I feel like they were in a way taken advantage of, possibly to bring a factory in that'll connect the dots between the factory in Martinsburg and where their site would be, and all those utilities would be right there along Route 9, which would explain the extra 500,000 gallons of water that the permit that Jefferson Utilities is going to provide. They'll only use a fraction of that. So there's a lot of questions need answered. A lot of decisions need made.
And after Katie, we have Chris Kinnan.
Good evening. My name is Katie Mextroth. I've lived in the county for about 4 years now. I have 2 young children, another on the way, all of who we plan to attend Jefferson County schools. I am here because I'm concerned about where my children are going to go to school. I'm concerned about the direction this county is taking, promoting heavy industry. I do not believe this factory will be the only one. I believe it's just the beginning, and soon we will have lots of heavy industry, and that's not what we want here. I looked up the EPA guidelines for new schools being built, and if you look at them, you will see that should Rockwell exist and North Jefferson not, according to the EPA standards, North Jefferson should not be built. So why then is it okay to build Rockwell next to where North Jefferson is now? It doesn't go with the guidelines. You can look those up on your own. It is important to involve the public and look at the high risk that the location has, among other things. My other concern is the traffic that's going to happen with all the large trucks. We know how small children are. They're not always paying attention. It's very concerning to me the number of big trucks that are going to be on the road will be a danger to students. I've emailed you all, I've heard back from some, but I would urge you all to please make a public statement that Rockwell is not the right fit for our community and that the location is not safe for our students. You are our elected representatives and we have entrusted you. I have entrusted you with my kids, and I plan to continue to do that. We are counting on you to speak out for us and say what we cannot say. You are in this position at this time for a purpose, and I believe that your purpose is to say no to Rockwell. Thank you.
And after Chris, we have Dr. Bob Miller.
Hi again. My name is Chris Kinnan. Thank you for your time this evening. I'm a Jefferson County resident of 6 years and a parent of 2 small children. Like Laurie, I'm a board member of the new nonprofit Jefferson County Vision. We've been created out of the Facebook group that began just a month ago that now has over 8,800 members. Our nonprofit also has a petition. We'll be delivering that to y'all. You're one of the recipients of it, against Rockwell, and that petition has over 8,000 folks. And again, these are all people overwhelmingly in West Virginia. I think 6,000 of those are in the 2nd District of West Virginia, and the remainder in the 10th Congressional District of Virginia. But it's an intensely focused and local group of people that care passionately about this community. We're a movement of parents. I think our entire board are made up of parents that came here on a promise, and the promise was this is a community of safe schools and clean air. Right? And Rockwell is a direct existential threat to that promise. And it's turning lives upside down already in the area around the facility. The people that structured their lives to have organic farms and to move here and to live here around that, they're suddenly faced, because of a broken process, an apple orchard converting to this global scale industrial facility with 21-story smokestacks, an extremely toxic pollution profile. They'll talk about Milton later, but the plant to look at is in Mississippi. That's the equivalent class of plant to what they're building here, and it's extremely toxic. And so we just argue, look, this is a broken process. Any economic development strategy that requires health and safety studies of our kids is an automatic non-starter. That's a no. Any economic development process that requires pollution monitoring in our schools for toxic air, that's an automatic no. And so we're organized around that. We're asking you all to, again, as Stan said, take a leadership role, stand up for the school system. We're going to ask everybody in the community, every elected official, every appointed official with voting power, do you support this location for this facility? Is this right? Obviously, the safe thing is to not build this plant. And again, we just ask you for your leadership on this issue, and thank you very much.
And next up is going to be Jennifer Jones.
Madam Chairman, there was a famous W.C. Fields movie in which he was sitting at a poker table, and one of the fellows around the table asked him, "Is this gambling?" And Fields told him, "Not the way I do it." And the reason I bring that up is because people have been saying that letting Rockwell into our community is gambling with our children's health and futures. And my problem is I don't think it's a gamble. I think it's a sucker's bet. And the way to find out is to look at the evidence of people who have had Rockwell plants in their community. I have in my hand a translation of a scholarly article about what happened with the Rockwell plant in, I'm going to try to pronounce this, Pikanština, Croatia. The locals there, Rockwell installed that plant in an area that was economically distressed and a former coal mining community. Madam Chairman, does that sound familiar to you? It does to me. The locals now describe the plant with words like thief of health, the cause of the loss of agricultural crops, the cause of smell. And they reckon that the price they paid for those 150 jobs was too high in the long run. Now, what happened was that the coal miners in that, former coal miners in that area started to know the symptoms. They recognized what had happened to them before. The plant was installed, but I have to say Mr. Ogilvie puts on a very pleasing, relaxing, well-worded, lawyerly presentation that makes it sound like there really is almost nothing coming out of those smokestacks. But the problems with the locals was that they found that it took 4 years of testing and adjusting to get the plant to the levels at which they were promised. And during that time, a lot of respiratory illnesses and other things began to build up. Mr. Ogilvie's presentation, at least the one that I saw last Thursday in Shepherdstown, completely omitted any mention of particulates, particularly the PM 2.5 micron fine particles that get into people's lungs and build up over time. The locals in Pikanština said that the damage is allowed because it is always just under the limit.
Dr.
But the
Miller.
problem is it's a buildup.
All right, thank you. And you're more than welcome to submit anything that you have in writing to Ms. Harner, and we can get a copy of it. Sorry to cut you off, but we need to keep moving. And after Ms. Jones, we have Roger Snaman.
Hi, Board. Thank you for hearing us. Thanks for listening. You've heard a lot on the data already, in the EPA data, and there's a ton of scientific work that a lot of my colleagues here have done that I'm not going to share with you tonight because they've already done it. Here's one fact that will, I think, hopefully solidify your fact that this is a toxic factory. They aren't allowed to operate in their own country of Denmark. They did not allow this factory to operate in their own country. So that's one point I want to make. And this is a fact that this plant will poison our kids, our water, and our air. They're going to show you a great presentation, which the doctor just shared with you is very well done, and it's not true. So I want to warn you about that because it's very slick, and it is not accurate. They are going to poison our kids, and our water, and our air. So how do you get out of a bad relationship? I was thinking about this metaphor. I've been in some bad relationships, personal relationships, marriage, other business relationships, and I thought, how do I get out of this? And I think the beginning of that is, I thought this person or this organization was right for me. And in the end, I learned, as I got to know them through facts and through behavior, they're not right for me. So how do I extricate myself from this? And the first thing you feel is, this is really hard. It's emotionally hard, it is stressful, and it might be really expensive. Fine. The short-term pain is worth the long-term goal of extricating ourselves from the pilot agreement with Rockwell. Please feel the pain. It's going to be hard. It's going to be stressful. Go for it. We've got your back. And I want you to know that. We've got your back. Board members, we're going to ask you, I want to put it this way too, we ask you to break up with Rockwell. Okay? They are not an honorable partner. They are not good for our community. They have lied to get to this place they're already in. And they and other heavy industry will poison our children. Don't let them do it. You stood up for the teachers and you stood up for the children. And we ask you to stand up again for our children now. Vote no to Rockwell, even if it hurts in the short run. It's be worth it in the long run. Thank you.
And after Mr. Snyman, we have Bruce Fry.
Good evening, I'm Roger Snyman. I'm here to talk to you about why I'm against the Rockwell factory being located in Jefferson County. And I'm going to sort of do away with everything at the beginning, and I'm going to go straight to the end, like a gentleman did last week, and I'm going to just say my ending statement first. There's never a bad time to do the right thing. Whether you did the right thing, who thought you did the right thing in the past, there's a time to do the right thing in the future. But I wanted to jump back to, there's been about 3, 4, or 5 comments about the infrastructure going to North Jefferson and to the plant. And I don't know, I won't tell my boss, but I spent a lot of time on the job today figuring out why it seems so important that we have the Rockwell plant there to support the sewer and water infrastructure. And I've come to the conclusion it's really not. You've got a $4.5 million bond or loan payable over 40 years. That's $121,000 a year. Sounds like a lot, but in business, that's not that much. At $6 every 100 gallons, that's 20,000 gallons. Most houses use 3,000 or 4,000 gallons. So if, in fact, that site produced 20,000 gallons or more or needed 20,000 gallons or more of water, that sewer bond would be paid off in a 40-year period. No reason to panic, no reason to pay it all at the beginning. There's a 40 years to pay it off. The second item, and that was important for North Jefferson Elementary also, that you don't have to have that plan in order to get the water. There's other ways around that. The sewer charge that Rockwell will be assessed will only be about $200 a day. Sewer charge is around $6, $7, $8 per thousand. They're only going to put out $20,000 a day, or about $50,000 a year. That's not enough money in itself to support a sewer system going out there. So I don't understand why we're so dependent on that plant being there to get the infrastructure that we need for future growth. Clean growth, not 200-foot smokestacks and sodium dioxide and PM 2.5 and all the rest of the laundry list that you saw on their permit. As a lot of people have been saying, you'll hear from Rockwell a little bit later, and this is the same company that sold themselves but forgot to tell you about the 200-foot smokestacks and the potential and actual pollutants, the ozone, to deplete the ozone. And they want us to accept them in our community as if they've been here for 20 years. And they haven't. They are injecting themselves into our community, not vice versa. We're not injecting ourselves into theirs. They're coming to ours. Final comments. There's a signed agreement, and that agreement was signed under false pretense, based on biased information from the JCDA and Rockwell. Don't put your community and our children at risk by continually supporting this polluter. Team with the Jefferson County Commission and Sheriff Pete to see how this is going to be stopped now. Thank you.
And after Bruce, we have Catherine Joswick.
Good evening, I'm Bruce Fry. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I want to talk about how we as citizens have not been given a voice in deciding that this company is going to be here. And I want to use the Jefferson County Development Authority as an example. And I have given you some materials with respect to that. Since the Jefferson County Development Authority has led the move to bring Rockwell to Jefferson County, I believe it's important to consider whether they have included the public in their decision-making. I have reviewed all the agendas and the minutes of the authority since December 2006. It was boring. In fact, I have in this two-page document essentially every word referring to this project in all of those agendas and minutes. In the 22 agendas during this time period, Rockwell are specifically mentioned only 3 times. 22 agendas. It is easy to conclude from my review that the authority failed to give real notice to the public that this project was proceeding. In fact, the minutes show Rockwell broke ground at the site in January 2018, only 5 months before the officially publicized groundbreaking. This project is well advanced. Very soon, Rockwell will succeed in what I believe has been their long-time strategy of following the old adage, it is better to ask forgiveness than to seek permission. I request that you help the concerned citizens of this county force Rockwell to seek permission to build this plant by your support of an immediate cessation of development of the Rockwell site while there is an independent analysis of the viability of this project. It is my understanding that both you and the authority are supporting some type of independent analysis. But an analysis is meaningless if the plant continues to be built. It is my preliminary view that this plant is an expensive boondoggle, costing tens and tens of millions of taxpayer dollars to create 150 jobs. The professional approach would be to conduct an economic and environmental cost-benefit analysis of the plant. I am sure Rockwell did their cost-benefit analysis. Now it is time for us to do our own. I'm a 15-year resident with my wife has been here 15 years, obviously. All my children and grandchildren are here. My oldest granddaughter, Aurora, is starting kindergarten this year. We don't want to leave, but we may have to.
And after Catherine, we have Melody O'Hanlon.
My name is Catherine Joswick, and I thank you again for letting us speak to you today. My 10-year-old, who goes to your schools, Driftwood, 4 miles away from the proposed factory, said to me that the key to a good presentation and making your points is repetition. So I am going to follow his advice, and I'm going to start with the end, which is I also, like many of these citizens, have 3 things to ask of you. Number 1, I ask you to rescind the pilot agreement that you agreed to. As the other citizens have said, we have your back in this. It might be expensive, it might be nasty, but we understand. My second, like the previous speaker mentioned, I ask you to ask for an immediate cessation of all work at the site. And I will talk a little bit more about that later, pending the health assessment and impact statements. And third, I ask you to direct Mr. Cable, your representative to the JCDA, to vote no on the 3rd reading of the water bond when it comes up. So I'm opposed to this factory on many fronts. Many people here have heard me speak before. Professionally, I'm a scientist, a molecular biologist who has studied pulmonary disorders for most of my career. That includes COPD, cystic fibrosis, and the scientific evidence that there are adverse health consequences from the emissions from this factory are unequivocal. Particularly, no pun intended, for the particulate matter 2.5 and 10 micron particles that you hear so much about. Those particles are so small, especially the 2.5, that they infiltrate your lungs, embed into the tissue, and it can even get into your cardiovascular system. You guys know, working with children, they are outside, they breathe more than we do, they drink more than we do. Hopefully those kids at North Jefferson and the 4 other schools within a 2-mile radius of that school are outside, playing, breathing with open mouths. And the scientific evidence is that this air is not right for them to breathe. I think it was Katie who brought up the EPA guideline that no school should be sited within half a mile of an industrial facility like this. But the World Health Organization guidelines are 2 miles. We have 4 schools within 2 miles comprising, I think, 30% of the Jefferson County school kids. As for the immediate cessation of work, which was mentioned as well, I ask this because those compounds are already in the air. The Jefferson Orchard property is already under a voluntary remediation plan due to heavy metals and other toxins that are in the soil due to pesticide use and such. And while the soil is being disturbed, those toxins are in the air, and the Jefferson County, North Jefferson students are already exposed to that. Personally, I moved here 16 years ago. Both my husband and I commute to DC jobs. And we thought that when we moved here, we didn't have kids. When we have kids, we're moving back to those schools in Montgomery County. Rescind the pilot agreement, immediate cessation of work, and Gary Cable, please vote no on the water bond. Thank you.
After Melody, we have Sandra Kelly.
I was not so lucky to grow up in Jefferson County, but my roots are in West Virginia, back generations. And I have lived in a West Virginia town so small there is not even one stoplight. And I have lived in the heart of Manhattan. I have chosen West Virginia. I've been in the Eastern Panhandle for 20 years, and I have chosen to live in Jefferson County, West Virginia, because it does not have heavy industry, because we have beautiful mountains and rivers and good schools and fresh air. This is our home. And every single time I return home from visiting family in Wheeling or Western Pennsylvania, I think how very glad I am that we do not have the industrial blight of those places. Every time I feel it, every time I drive back, and I'm looking over the farms and at the mountains, I really do feel that. But it seems that all of that is about to change. Clearly, we didn't know everything when the Rockwell pilot was approved. Now that we have learned more, it's time to say, no thank you. This project, and any heavy industry, is not consistent with the vision of the Jefferson County that I knew. It's not consistent with what anyone lives here for, at least anyone that I know. My son is in 5th grade at Driftwood. He loves Driftwood. He loves our home. And I don't just mean our house. He loves our home in Jefferson County. He talks about getting a summer job with River Riders when he gets old enough. I don't want to tear him from our home. I don't want to leave our home. But I will if this project goes through. Because as an earlier speaker so much more eloquently said, the level of risk is not acceptable. Please do everything in your power to take any remaining actions that you can to put a stop to this project. We can find better sources of revenue for our schools. Our children's very lives depend upon it. Thank you.
And after Sandra, we have Marianne Bonzio.
Hey guys, thank you. Thank you for allowing us the time to speak today. I know I can speak on all of us' behalf when I say thank you for that. My name is Sandra Kelly. I have been a resident of West Virginia for 15 years, 10 years here in Jefferson County. I own a small farm in Harpers Ferry. I came here today to share my concern with the board about the pollution that will be present in our air if Rockwell facility is allowed to begin operations. I am concerned not only for my own health and that of my family, but also for the health of my rescue animals, the cleanliness of my water, and the toxic chemicals that may make their way into my vegetable crops, my main food source. I am not fortunate enough to have children, but if I did, I would be petrified for their health, and I can imagine that given the new information we have now, I am certain a lot of parents are feeling this way. On a more personal note, my parents are aging and they live within 5 miles of the proposed site. My father has asthma and I worry how this will affect his health or possibly even shorten his life. My mother suffers from an autoimmune disease and I also worry that the reduction in air quality will greatly change her quality of life. I know you have heard these things before, and within the course of the coming months, I'm sure that you will hear them again. I have taken the time to go to their open houses. I have learned way more about this company than I ever wanted to know. I am now an expert on formaldehyde and its effects on the human body. And I have nothing but kind things to say about the employees of Rockwell. They have been nothing but kind and patient with me and all of my hundreds of questions. And when I learned that someone had sprayed graffiti on their sign, I felt bad for our community and for them. I, along with several other people opposed to this factory, went and cleaned that sign this morning right alongside with Leslie from Rockwell. And let me tell you, she put gloves on and she got her SOS pad, and this girl scrubbed. She scrubbed. It wasn't a photo op. She scrubbed with us. I did that for our community because how can we fight so hard for a beautiful place and condone that kind of behavior? All of that aside, the purpose of my speaking today is to ask for help from the board to assist us in any way possible in stopping Rockwell from obtaining any further permits. Please keep them out of our beautiful home, protect our children, and protect our beautiful county. Thank you.
And after Marianne, we have Timothy Arthrop.
Good evening, and thank you for the time to address you tonight. I'm here once again to speak out against the Rockwell facility. When I spoke to you last, I addressed my concerns as a citizen of the county, a mother, and an emergency planner. While all my same concerns still exist in those capacities, I came here tonight to simply ask you to do the right thing. You are in leadership positions here in our community. You are here to represent us and our children. Your community has spoken out against the Rockwell facility in large numbers, and you have the power to do something about it. You were given that power by those who elected you into these positions. Those same people are here tonight and are asking you now to do, and imploring you to act on their behalf. I'm here tonight to ask you, Mr. Cable, to use your vote on the JCDA to vote no on the third reading of the water bond for Rockwell. I know that it appears that none of you knew all the facts and science surrounding the emissions and hazards that Rockwell will emit. But today, due to the hard work and due diligence of the citizens of Jefferson County, you can no longer make that claim. The citizens of this county have conducted the due diligence that those in leadership positions in our county did not. As upsetting as that is, that those who we put our trust in did not investigate what this facility would really mean for us, we are trying to give those same leaders an opportunity to right that wrong. Because this was wrong, it is still wrong, and it will be wrong if it moves forward. I read an article recently on CBS News regarding the latest about the Flint water crisis. The article discussed the tremendous loss of trust the citizens of Flint have in their leadership. The same loss of community trust in some of our leadership is occurring here today in Jefferson County. The article also discussed how 15 current and former state and city government officials have been indicted in connection with that crisis. It talked about how a spokesperson for the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality called one of the first whistleblowers, a pediatrician, Dr. Hannah Atisha, an unfortunate researcher, and said that she was causing near hysteria. I'm going to bet that today those 15 former state and city government officials wish that they had listened to the good doctor when she spoke up. You've had the facts pointed out to you. You know what you can do to prevent Rockwell from coming here and doing damage to our land, our agriculture, our tourism industry, and most of our health. You may no longer plead ignorance, nor should you. Leaders who don't act in the best interest of their citizens will be complicit if this moves forward. I know there are consequences to backing out of the pilot agreement. I know it's a tough pill to swallow, and I know you're scared. We teach our children to stand up for what is right. They make a mistake, we tell them to try and fix it. I beg of you, please do not be scared of the consequences of doing the right thing, but be petrified of the consequences of doing the wrong thing. Thank you.
After Timothy, we have Terry Freemeyer.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I come to you as a parent, as a concerned citizen, and as a scientist. I'm the parent of a daughter who's gone to Shipley, currently at Harpers Ferry Middle, and will be going to Jefferson High. Of course, I am concerned. I've been to the open house that the company has had. I came away with lots of questions. I've done some reading on my own, and with my background as a scientist, I won't belabor some of the points that have been made, especially regarding pulmonary diseases created by and fostered by some of these compounds. Particulate matter is nasty stuff. As an asthmatic, I worry about that. Ozone is quite problematic. Phenol can burn. I've worked in a laboratory. I've had phenol burns before. And formaldehyde, used in pickling samples. I mean, embalming fluid. Think about that. I also concerned about the traffic along the 115, as it's called now. Semi after semi after semi, and after talking with the fine folks at Rockwell, they really didn't think about semis having to make wide right turns to go into their facility. And I think about the hazards that creates. They were just now trying to figure out what the proper bus schedules are and how that may or may not conflict with their schedules. Most of their feedstock is not basalt, but is actually industrial slag, which is a witch's brew that no company wants. On top of that, the power source for melting all of this is not necessarily the natural gas. 70% of it is going to be coal. Will they have a siding coming off of the railroad tracks? I've been told no. I urge you to do what you can to reject this. It's an issue of social justice by putting a factory like this in a fine county like this. And I also think about the long-term ramifications of parents wanting to leave this county. As it is now, the county is hard-pressed to recapture money from students who are homeschooled. Think about an educated populace leaving this county. Thank you.
And after Terry, we have Jay Mansfield.
Don't start your timer yet. Have a little handout so you don't have to take notes. Or you can surf it, please. The folks that are here are all concerned. We're not NIMBYs. We're concerned about our children. But what I've done is kind of done some elementary math. The EPA and Rockwell give you all the particulate matter and everything else in tons. I've kind of broken it down into pounds per day, which is something we all can relate to. And I'm going to just read through this. This is pounds per day of toxic output from the Rockwell plant. Nitrogen oxides, 1,357 pounds a day. Sulfur dioxide, 840 pounds a day. Carbon monoxide, 420 pounds a day. Volatile organic compounds, 420 pounds per day. Particulate matter, 2,369 pounds per day. Carbon dioxide equivalents, 869,931 pounds a day. Hazardous air pollutants, 2,200 pounds per day. Sulfuric acid mist, that really sounds great, 93 pounds per day. Mineral fiber, hazardous air pollution, 642 pounds per day. Methanol, 590 pounds per day. Phenol, 60 pounds per day. Formaldehyde, embalming fluid, 384 pounds a day. And we have carbonyl sulfide, hydrogen fluoride, hydrochloric acid, hexane, butane, and lead at about 31 pounds per day. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a total of over 3 million pounds per year of toxic waste from this facility. Please rethink the pilot agreement and going forward how we can best not have this in our county. Thank you.
And after Jay, we have Heather Young.
My name is Jay Mansfield. I'm from Shepherdstown. I've been here about 25 years. I have degrees in chemistry and human physiology. I was in the oil business. I did hazardous waste treatment. I did worldwide surveillance for bioterrorism and emerging viral and bacterial infections. I understand surveillance and I understand mass casualty. My systems are used by Interpol, FBI, CIA, and the DOD. It's better than that, though. They scrapped their other system they were using. So this is good stuff. I'm a kid hugger, not a tree hugger per se. I love children, and I have an internal desire to be a voice for children with breathing disorders. My brother died of pneumonia complications with muscular dystrophy. And I know for a fact that young black children have a 2 to 3-fold increase in the incidence and prevalence of asthma. And they also have a 10-fold increase in death due to complications of asthma. And the reason for that is because when they were doing the studies about the drugs that could help asthma, they didn't include black kids. And then there was a rule in 1992 said that you have to do it. And then they checked it out in 2015 and found out they only did it 15% of the time, 5% of the time. Okay? So there's still nothing for our black kids when they have asthma. Our white kids, they're doing okay. All right? So I want to be a voice for that. I mentioned that last time, and I think I did it this time too. Rockwell, not the company, the product was listed as a carcinogen and then retested in 1995, but without the binder. The binder is kind of like the stuff that keeps it all together. With no binder, it was tested as not carcinogenic. With binder, we don't know. It's being tested now. There's a rule out there about the way they test for toxicity. It's called Haber's Rule. Haber's Rule is what they always use. Now, that is the way you find out if something's toxic or not. They take all kinds of different things into equation. There's another rule, possibility, and that's called the reduced life expectancy rule. And that's a new way of calculating things, and we will soon find out that there are problems. This modeling here that came with their application, there's a lot of problems with modeling. Modeling is like driving a go-kart. It's not a real car. It's a fake car. And if you turn the thing, it'll go in the direction you want it to go. Okay? Don't believe that modeling is some wonderful thing. Okay? They got idiots doing modeling now. Okay? Rockwell doesn't have an idiot doing modeling. But I can tell you this. They didn't. Oh, please. I got to say this. In the modeling results, I did a text search for the words student, teacher, children, asthma, breathing, COPD, school, and education. No modeling. So don't let them tell you that they did it.
After Heather, we have Kevin Hall.
I'm the odd man out because I'm not here to talk about Rockwell. I have never worried about my children on a Jefferson County school bus, either the condition of the bus or the driver. Now I have a student athlete who is supposed to ride River Riders buses in the place of a county school bus, and I am extremely upset. How does River Riders acquire their buses? Through auctions, where county schools deem the buses not fit for use by mileage or age. If they were used by a school system at some time, then deemed not fit for use, why are we okay with using them to transport our students? How do they hire their drivers? I've been told it takes 3 months to hire a Jefferson County bus driver. School bus drivers have to have a clean driving record. They are fingerprinted, background checked, and they have specialized driving training. I doubt the same amount of time is spent by a private company to hire and train drivers. School bus drivers have a pre-trip list to go over before every bus run. How do we know that River Riders has as vigorous a list as the school system? What about maintenance? School bus mechanics are specially trained in school bus maintenance. School buses are serviced according to factory recommendations for preventative maintenance, not just when something is broken. We put an emphasis on safety for our students. We hold monthly drills, yet what do we know about the buses and the drivers? Nothing against River Riders. I've been rafting with their company and I know they are a business partner, but they do not specialize in driving long distances and hauling our students exclusively. I don't think this should be the answer to not having enough bus drivers. My job as a parent is to keep my kids safe. My job as a teacher is to keep my students safe. I don't think we are doing either by putting students on buses that we don't maintain or regulate the drivers.
And after Kevin, we have Sharon Wilt.
Members of the Board of Education, thank you very much for letting us speak this evening. So, in fact, I've been in Jefferson County for 40 plus years. My name is Kevin Hall, and I actually went to school right here in this building, and I don't think it had air conditioning back then either. So what I would like to say to you guys, don't underestimate your influence. Talk to your respective town council members, your commissioners, and especially your representation on the JCDA, and have him vote no to the third reading. This is not right for our county. So issue a resolution that you no longer support the pilot agreement or simply rescind it. Come out with a public statement in opposition. Don't be afraid. The citizens are behind you. So I have a quote from Science Magazine. It says, "Children going to schools near buildings with smokestacks releasing large quantities of pollution have developed ailments such as asthma and cancer. There are hundreds and thousands of studies by reputable organizations, universities, and scientists that have come to the same conclusion." So we know that there will be an effect. What exactly it is, we don't know right away. You may not see it right away. It could be a year, it could be 5, 10, 15, 20, even 30 years down the road. But if you took the population of this county and you increased the percentage of cancer or asthma by 1/100%, that would be 5 people. How do you pick the 5 people that are going to be affected? If it was 0.02, 2/100s, that would be 10. If it jumps a whole percentage, that would be 500 or 2% of thousands. So how do you pick those numbers? I say any risk is not good. So lots of things have been regulated by federal governments and agencies, even the EPA, and some of them were just total disasters. So in June of 1957, Disneyland in California added a new building to their attractions. It was called Tomorrowland. It was the vision of a carefree house to come, made totally of plastic, the house of the future. It was sponsored by Monsanto, one of the biggest chemical companies in the world, and it attracted 20 million visitors over the next 10 years. They were a great company. They had a sponsored ride in Disney. But there was a horrible scenario unfolding in Anniston, Alabama, since this company produced PCBs. They were banned in 1979. Imagine a place so saturated with toxic cancer-causing chemicals, it's so contaminated that residents have been told not to grow vegetables in the soil, don't kick up dirt, don't eat food or chew gum or smoke cigarettes while you're working in your yard. The children have to play in the streets, on the sidewalks, because they can't play in the grass. This company is not right to come here to our county, and it is not safe for our children.
After Sharon, we have Gina Biller.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having us. I want to say my name is Sharon Wilt. I am a 60-year resident of Jefferson County. I've spent my entire life here. I started my education in a 3-room grade school in Shenandoah Junction. My roots run deep. The baseball field at Jefferson High School is named for my uncle, Sager Field. I here today to ask the school board to rescind their vote. I want to know why the gentleman that came in that first presented this to you all, the only thing I can remember is his name was John. Why was the school board the last on the agenda to be asked? When we, as parents in the school board, have the most to gain. You, sir, said Rockwell was here once before. Drive down Blair Road. It looks like Doomsday, Thunderdome, where there's still debris that was dumped down there 50 plus years ago. Your father worked there. You, ma'am, you asked them, why didn't you come to us? We could have asked for something like Rumsey to teach and educate our students that could be there to learn them a trade that would help them to work in factories, not heavy industrial factories. We don't need that. We don't need this footprint in our county. It's been green. We need to keep it green. North Jefferson Elementary, he stood here and told you all, you will have to pay a tap fee to get the water over there to them. They pay nothing. It'd be 11 years before Rockwell comes due and pays anything for that. You were also told that you could become a developer if you so chose. And you could charge people to tap in to get some of your money back quicker than that 11-year period. So now they want the school board to be a developer and charge a tap fee to get the county's money back. Please, we're here to educate our children, our youth, that's going to run our country one day. And then turn lanes for Rockwell's tractor and trailers. What about our buses? Have you ever been out Route 9 or 115 as they so call it when school lets in or lets out? It's a massive mess. I'm surprised someone hasn't been injured out there. And I just have to get this in there. We, as taxpayers of the state of West Virginia, are going to pay for that road system that will go all the way back from Route 9 or 115 to their plant that we hope that you rescind your vote that they don't get to build. Thank you.
And after Gina, we have Lynn Bacciero.
Hi, my name is Gina Biller. I've been here for 42 years. I raised my children here and thought I was going to retire and live the rest of my life. My children each have 2-acre lots on each side of me. We live 1.5 miles away from this. My children were in the process of building, and my grandchildren would be going to North Jefferson. We were never told anything. We were never sent anything in the mail, although they continue to say that they have sent stuff. Like I said, I live within 1.5 miles. We saw no signs. We saw a sign for them, but it didn't, we didn't think there was any problem because the property was zoned as light industrial. So, without having that zoning change, we didn't think anything until we saw all the things that were coming out. Now, they're going to show you a nice little video, and it's going to be all fluff and flowers and everything else. But there's a few questions I think you need to ask because I've been asking and I can't seem to get answers for. First of all, where are they going to put their waste, their toxic waste? Our landfill's full, and it's not an industrial landfill. So where's all that going to go? Okay? Now, the second thing is, who's going to be in charge of the emergency when we have to evacuate that school because of the smell for the day, or because of the toxins, or because we have a nuclear or some kind of an explosion? Or what if we have a fire? Or what if there's some kind of a spill from the chemicals? Because if they don't get this pipeline, they're going to be driving in big trucks with liquid-fed natural gas in it. Okay? All these things are going to be on the road on old Route 9 right in front of my house. 65 to 100 trucks a day. This is not a good place for North Jefferson. It's not a good place for this place to be. Anywhere near any schools. It shouldn't even be in our county. We are good, healthy, environmentally safe in county. We've tried so hard to do this. I've lived here for 45 years. I appreciate all of you. I beg you to please rescind anything that you have done. Whatever promises you've made and you have things that come out of your pocket, we will be behind you. We stand behind you. We beg you. Please, be on our side. This company does not need to be here. They've been telling lies from the beginning. The first thing out of their mouth is that, nobody's ever complained about them. Oh my God, there's tons of articles you can read from Croatia and Ontario, Canada, and Mississippi. Okay, the toxins are horrible, and it's way too close to the school for our children. And if we don't stop this, you probably won't have to worry about North Jefferson because enough people will move out of this county that you can just bust those few kids that are left someplace else. But I feel sorry for everybody that's going to stay here because this is not a good fit for Jefferson County. It's not. I know all of you have children. For your own children, please think about it, okay? Because be an example to your grandchildren. They learn from what they see, not from what they're told. And I think it's important that you please rethink this. And like we said, whatever you have to go through, we got your back. Whatever it takes. But please stop this.
And after Lynn, we have George Miller.
Hi there. I'd like to read a letter. My name is Lynn Bocchiaro. This is from myself and from my husband, Joe. A year ago, we moved to West Virginia to breathe this fresh air and enjoy living in this beautiful place for the rest of our lives. We are extremely angry and so disappointed in all the local officials who actively sought to bring heavy industry to our county in the form of the Rockwell plant, or who signed off on it without due diligence. While we are certainly very concerned about our own health, quality of life, and the value of our property, we also care about the health and welfare of the children of Jefferson County. We find it inconceivable that anyone would agree to allow an industrial plant to be located in such close proximity to 4 schools. The children have no choice about where they must go to school, and they all depend on you. The teachers and staff, however, do have free will. Have you considered that this could result in the county's loss of good teachers who don't want to put their own health in jeopardy? As we learn more about this shrouded, complex process, we understand that you may not have had all the facts necessary to make an informed decision. So we have some questions for you. Do you still support permitting the Rockwell facility to be built here? Will you publicly declare your position on Rockwell? If you are opposed, will you propose and vote for a resolution declaring the Board of Education's opposition to the Rockwell plant being located here? And will you instruct your representative on the Jefferson County Development Authority to vote no on the 3rd reading of the water bond? We are ready to support you if you choose to do the right thing for the children and for the community, and do everything in your power to keep Rockwell heavy industry out of Jefferson County. This could include your withdrawal of your signatory of the pilot agreement. Thank you for your consideration, and we look forward to your responses.
And after George, we have David Tabb.
George Miller, local farmer. live out Cabletown Road, and I'm concerned about the industrial sewage that's going to come from this plant. Presently, the Charlestown treatment plant sends their treated sewage to a local farm. I'm on Bullskin Run near the Shenandoah River. Runoff from that farm goes into, after they grow their crops, into Bullskin, Shenandoah River. May 17th, after a week of intense rain, half of my property in Avon Bend was flooded, including the land that I grow crops in. I sell directly to my customers at farmers markets, DC, Silver Spring. Get a lot of comments about how wonderful my products are. How do you do this? I always tell them, live in almost heaven, West Virginia. And I can't look at them with good faith now if I don't know what's going on. And that's about all I have to say, asking you to do the right thing.
And after David Tabb, we have Sean Amos.
I'd like to clear up a few items that were said earlier. I've never heard this said before, that we're not supposed to direct to anybody else other than to the commission here, the school board. Yet you have Rockwell information in the agenda. And you're telling me that I cannot address something to them. So I'll direct it to you. What the heck are y'all thinking? Come on. My family has been here for almost 400 years. When do I become a native? Okay? I've been entrusted. My parents have passed, and I have been entrusted. I have been taught by them. I have been educated by them. Why don't you take up some of these people that are coming in here volunteering their time and be advisories to you? I am sure, I am positive that they would give their time and pay for their own gas in their own vehicle to come and help y'all make a educated decision. Is that not why you're here? To those that weren't here, that just got elected, you really need to look at this, because I'm coming on full force. Speaking here tonight is not at your pleasure. It's a requirement of law. It's in your bylaws for us allowed to speak here. Ask the county commission. They're going to have to answer to a court to what they did on the 16th. They thought they were bigger and better than the law. They broke the law. If you break the law, shame on you. You have an opportunity here to fix this. What did you give up to sign off? What did you give up? Come clean. Tell us. It was nothing. But it was millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that you could have collected in taxes. I already know what some of the other ones got. But y'all were the biggest one in this whole thing. I've challenged you in court. Never had a day in court, but I challenged you on the excess levy. And I proved that you got $2.3 million and you were supposed to. And according to the ballot and everything, you could keep the money. But you still have not proven where you did the money. So, is this part of what y'all got signed off on? $120 million that you got to steal from the people on a ballot? Y'all have a nice day.
Next up, we have Jason Murphy.
Good evening, board members. Thank you so much for having us here this evening. You've heard a fair amount about the pilot agreement, and I've presented it to you here. On the 3rd of October, Scott Sutta signed a document that says the county board has found and hereby finds that the agreements herewith promote the present and prospective prosperity, health, happiness, safety, and general welfare of the public school students in Jefferson County. And you see his signature right there at the right. This was signed on the 3rd of October. If you look with me at the left, the one time that the people that are sitting in front of you right now have told the truth was printed in the spirit of Jefferson on the night of 22nd November 2017, the night before Thanksgiving. I want you to look at that list of nasties. Would you have signed this pilot agreement if you had seen this before the 3rd of October? I dare say you would not have. I said at a last meeting that this was the pig in the poke. Somebody sold you this without you knowing what was in it. Your signature is now on it, and here's what they gave you. One of the things you've heard about tonight is particulate matter. If you look there at the left, 2.5 microns, that's how big it is. And I want you to see how many tons a year they're allowed to put out. 134 tons a year. Look there at the right. One cigarette has 12 milligrams of PM 2.5. One cigarette. It would take 10,130,228,596 cigarettes to make 134 tons. To make that simple for you, that's 27.7 million cigarettes a day that will be coming out of what they call steam stacks. Now they're calling them steam stacks because they're wanting you to think that it's not smoke. This PM 2.5 is stuff you can't see. It's so small that it gets through into your lungs, like you've heard earlier. That's what was allowed. Now here's the scary part. The Department of Environmental Protection says that that's okay, that you can actually do that right next to this school. And they're gonna, now that the pig is out of the poke, what they're going to do tonight up here is they're going to put lipstick on that pig. I have heard from them over and over again that what comes out of that smokestack is no different than the air that you breathe. They're going to talk to you about formaldehyde. And they're going to say, well, that comes out of your breath. You exhale it. I don't know how many of you have ever French kissed another human being, but it didn't require an EPA permit, and it certainly didn't require a 220-foot smokestack. But that's the kind of thing they told people to get them to sign that. That's what they told them. They're going to tell you tonight that everything that they're doing, that West Virginia doesn't even monitor some of these things, but they're going to use the levels from Virginia since we don't. I want you to think about that for a minute. These people are saying that the things that are monitored are okay. Look at the second page. This article was written 2 weeks ago. The title is Ambient PM2 Reduces Global and Regional Life Expectancy, August 22nd, 2018. First sentence, exposure to ambient fine particulate matter air pollution is a major risk for premature death. This was just last week. The EPA doesn't regulate it. They're right. They actually have a permit to do this. Is it worth a roulette game with the kids' health? We don't know what this is going to do. 20 years ago, we all had parents that smoked in the car. How many cigarettes are okay?
I'm sorry.
All right, well, I'm asking you to pull that thing out.
And after Jason, we have Emma Huvas.
I sent you all this as an email, but I thought it should be on the recorded public record. You are now painfully aware of the public opposition going on against Rockwell. And our opposition is quite active, quite vocal, and quite vigorous. You may also know it's been growing rapidly. I spoke to you the last time about this, and I was very encouraged by your statement afterwards. However, I would respectfully suggest that the board can and should go farther than simply ask for answers and studies. I, like many others, have watched the board meeting where Mr. Reisenweber from the JCDA gave his pitch and his presentation to the board and asked for your consent and your action on the pilot agreement, without which this wouldn't be possible. I was greatly bothered when I realized that proper questions were not being asked or answered to give you any impact understanding of what this facility would be as it was placed in our community and very near our schools. However, in my attending numerous other meetings with the County Commission and local towns, it's become clear that none of our elected bodies have asked these questions, as this project was being shown to them as a new light industry facility. And it was marketing itself as very eco-friendly. And that the support of bodies such as yours was sought long before, as Sean pointed out, their pollution disclosures were made public. I'm sure that Mr. Reisenweber knew that if he approached the school board and asked you to sign off on a project that would put out particulate matter that rivals the quantities from mid-sized coal plants, or emissions that are greater than what we see in Kanawha, and that is clearly a heavy industry project, that they wanted it to be placed next to our schools, the board would never have agreed to such a thing. It should be noted that nowhere in our county zoning or comprehensive plan is heavy industry allowed, yet somehow, here we are. Since the board was actively denied the information most vital to properly assess this decision and its impact, it is well within your rights to rescind your approval and your support of the project and the pilot agreement. We, as the community, ask that you also publicly and privately make your statements of your disapproval of this project and of the process that gained its approval, and of the JCDA choosing to leave out the information that was most absolutely essential for you to sincerely assess what this would mean. We also request that you direct, as the board, your JCDA representative to vote no on the upcoming sewer bond as it's being voted, because it will make Rockwell and further heavy industry a much more likely reality in the heart of our county and in the midst of all of our schools. The bond may be a good thing down the road, but delays happen. Let it come back up once this is off the table. We know that you are responsible and thoughtful people, and you would never choose to build an elementary school across the street from heavy industry, or what would be putting out some of the biggest emission sources in our state. You have the authority and you have the ability to stand up against this both decisively and forcefully. Thank you.
Emma? And after Emma is Morgan Sell.
Hi. Thank you for making the time to listen to us tonight. I'd like to start off by harkening back to what Sean Amos mentioned a moment ago, Section 1.02B of the pilot agreement, which you signed off on September 25th, 2017. It states that the board has found that the pilot agreement will promote the present and prospective prosperity, health, happiness, safety, and general welfare of the public school students in Jefferson County. This month, many of us have wondered how you could have believed that. But I know how. It's because at no point prior to the signing of the pilot agreement did either Rockwell or the JCDA provide you with any information about the potential emissions of the proposed plant. This is unfortunate because had that information been made available to you, I can only imagine that you would have proceeded differently. With emissions data in hand, you might perhaps have thought to review the EPA's school siting guidelines, which recommend, and I quote, that communities should seek to avoid situations in which new nearby sources of potentially harmful pollutants are sited in such close proximity to schools that they may pose a potential hazard to the school occupants. You might have referred to Section 202.06 of the West Virginia Department of Education's Handbook on School Planning Facilities, which notes, and I quote, that for the safety of students, school sites shall be located away from hazards and undesirable environments such as noise, toxic gas escapes from odoriferous plants or industries, and property zoned as industrial. You might have learned that the World Health Organization directs do not build schools within 2 miles of facilities that release toxic chemicals into the air or land. Had you had access to the emissions information, you might have demanded a preliminary environmental assessment to be conducted prior to signing off on the pilot agreement. You were not given that information, however, and you now find yourselves in what I can only imagine must be an extremely uncomfortable position. I hope that you will rescind your approval of the pilot agreement in light of the fact that you are not presented with full information about the true scale and impact of Rockwell's plant. Thank you.
Our last speaker of the evening, Morgan.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us. Good to see you guys again on, not so fun terms, everybody. I'd like to just share that I've been going through the 7 stages of grief, just like everybody here, First shock and denial, then pain and guilt, anger and bargaining, depression, reflection, loneliness, and then right where I am now. And I'd like to apologize to Rockwell for any misplaced anger that I may have had towards you, as it clearly belongs somewhere else, or maybe not at all. Now I am at stage 5, the upward turn, and I'm looking forward to reconstruction and working through, and then on to acceptance and hope. But first I'd like to share a couple nursery rhymes with you. Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack can't breathe, Jack got sick. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? It doesn't, it stops, we lost our crops, and now I have nowhere to go. Rockabye baby on the treetops, where the wind blows, we don't know where it stops. Maybe in Loudoun County, but maybe not. Please do the next right thing, and we will support you nonstop. Roses are red and violets are blue. You can say no to the pilot agreement and the water bond too. I have a couple more, I think. Maybe one more. This is two more. Monday's child is full of formaldehyde. Tuesday's had no choice. Wednesday's child is full of particulate matter. And Thursday's child had no voice. Friday's child is loving and giving. And Saturday's child works hard for a living. And the child that is born, that is able to breathe, is bonny and blithe and won't want to leave. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama will protect you, and so will the board. And if the Board of Ed needs our support, we will be there for them, even if it's in court. And now, with the time that we have left, just like with any tragedy that we deal with as a community, I would like to take the rest of my time and take a moment of silence for the kids who cannot use their voices here tonight because they're back in these schools. So will you join me in prayer and silence for this tragedy that we're having to deal with as a community? Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you sleep deeply on this choice tonight. Thank you so much.
Do you have room for any more? No, ma'am, I'm sorry. You have to sign up by 6:45.
I was out and somebody asked me to.
Presentation.
The presentation is from Rockwell. I believe Mr. Ogilvy will be taking the lead. And oh, yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Michael Zarin. I'm the head of communications for Rockwell Group. I can see I just knocked that out. Give me a moment, if you would, please. Well, yeah, if you don't mind
I
that.
saw you struggling and came to see you.
I did. I knocked out the cable, but oh, there we go. So let's see if I can get it into presentation mode. Should be good. On this setup, how do you get it into presentation mode?
You got one over top of the other one.
Sorry, Mom. That'll work. Good. That'll be very fine. Well, let me just try that one more time. Thanks for letting us be here tonight. Appreciate the invitation. My name is Michael Zarin. I'm the head of group communications at Rockwell. I'm based at the headquarters in Denmark, though I grew up not so far from here outside of Washington, D.C. On behalf of my colleagues who are here, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. We look forward to addressing some of the issues that have been raised and answering the questions that the school board has. There are a lot of things that have been shared this evening, certainly a lot of passion in the room. Many of the people we've met several times before, and we appreciate that. There are, however, a number of things that I just, before I start otherwise, wanted to clarify, just because some of this stuff has been perhaps not quite as factually accurate as one might hope. We have not stopped operating in Denmark, as was said. We are allowed to operate in Denmark. We do operate in Denmark. We have several factories in Denmark. We're expanding a factory in Denmark. We also operate throughout the EU with factories in the United Kingdom, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Spain, Switzerland, which is not typically considered the hotbed of polluting industries. We also operate in Poland, Romania, we're building a factory, elsewhere around the world. In fact, 45 manufacturing facilities around the world. There was a reference to industrial sludge. There won't be any of that, so no need to worry. Industrial slag as a main ingredient, that's also not correct. Volcanic rock is the main ingredient. We are allowed to use something called blast furnace slag. We might use that in some quantities. It's actually an environmentally reasonably okay material. It's been used before in the steel industry. So most of the impurities in that slag that we might use have already been taken out through the first process, and it's used in ways that are actually quite environmentally friendly. But that aside, let me share with you also just a few quick reflections on the open houses that we had during the last couple of days. We are quite pleased with the interest that was shown, the number of people who came out to visit. We enjoyed very much the discussions. There was a lot of engagement. We were pleased with that, and I just want to thank some of you who are here for coming out and speaking with us. We appreciate that. As we move ahead this evening in the presentation, I'll make a few comments to set a certain context. After that, Trent Ogilvie, the president of our North American business operations, will discuss some of the issues that the school board has raised, including the issues pertaining to air quality and monitoring, the health risk assessment that's been discussed, as well as your questions about continuation of the project. Our group senior vice president for operations and technology, Bjorn Andersen, will address your questions in relation to emergency preparedness. We also have Peter Regenberg, who's our vice president for U.S. operations, to answer questions that fall in his purview. We understand that there will be time for questions from the school board following our presentation. We certainly look forward to answering those questions. We brought with us a number of visuals to help visualize the plant. Here on the screen, and also here the big picture, is an architect's rendering of the facility once it's built. You can see the factory in the upper right quadrant across the highway, and of course over to North Jefferson Elementary School across the way. One of the major concerns, issues the school board and community members have expressed involves air quality, and especially the impact on children. Before Trent goes into more detail on those questions, it's important to consider the bigger picture into which the Rockwell facility fits. Two of the most important governing standards and regulations are the National Ambient Air Quality Standards and the Maximum Achievable Control Technologies, also called MACT. The MACT rules set sector-specific legal limits on specific emissions, while the National Ambient Air Quality Standards establish safe exposure limits on other substances. In both cases, the safety standards are based on the specific health needs and requirements of sensitive populations, including children, the elderly, and asthmatics. They also take into account protecting against decreased visibility, as well as damage to animals, crops, vegetation, and even buildings. What's more, these standards must be met under worst-case conditions. Those conditions include operating 24/7, 365 days a year, producing the product that pushes the maximum volume through the production process in the shortest time. It models the maximum concentrations where they're at their highest at any given geographic point, taking into account weather conditions. And again, the worst-case conditions apply first and foremost to protect the health needs of sensitive population, children, elderly, and asthmatics. As Trent will detail in a moment, the Rockwell emissions will be significantly below even these very strict standards. These are not standards that Rockwell sets, but they are standards that we have to comply with. It's relevant to highlight for the board the extensive data and analysis that goes into studying the health impacts and setting these standards. Let's look at the MAC, the Maximum Achievable Control Technology Standards, for a moment. This is a regulation that limits the emissions of certain types of pollutants for specific industries such as ours. So they're designed specifically for the mineral wool industry. Other industries as well, but we're talking about the ones that apply to us. These limits are reviewed every 8 years. Now that makes a lot of sense because it takes into account technological evolution as well as the evolution of our scientific knowledge. The most recent standards were published in 2015. The EPA spent several years collecting emissions data from the entire U.S. mineral wool industry. The EPA dictates what data must be collected, by whom it can be independently collected, and the methodology by which it's analyzed. The Sierra Club was party to and an active participant throughout the entire rulemaking process. The Sierra Club accepted those rules that were designed specifically for our industry and imposed new limits upon that industry. Rockwell's best-in-class technologies will ensure that we stay well within those limits, which anyway are extremely rigorous. The EPA concluded that these emission limits from mineral wool manufacturing provides an ample margin of safety to protect human health and the environment. Now, with that background, I'd like to ask Trent to come talk further about the specific impacts or the specific things about the Rockwell facility here in Branson.
Thank you, Michael. Trent Ogilvie, president of Rockwell's insulation business in North America, a position I've held for 23 years. So I'm going to talk about air quality. And apologize, our monitors don't seem to be picking up the slides that accurately. However, this is a slide about particulate matter. There's been quite a few questions about particulate matter. And what we've shown here are what our maximum concentrations will be in the worst case scenario. So you can see that in green against the standard. And that's based on 43,000 hours of meteorological data. On the left is PM10. And you can see our maximum concentration is 1/6 of these national air quality standards. For PM2.5, we're also 1/6 of the standards. Again, as Michael's just explained, these are maximum concentrations in a worst case scenario designed to protect the most vulnerable in society: children, the elderly, and the asthmatic. Formaldehyde has also been mentioned, and I want to share something with you and ask you to think about it. Right now, each of you is breathing out formaldehyde, which is a naturally occurring compound. In fact, you're breathing out formaldehyde at a concentration of 1/1,000,000th of a gram in a cubic meter of air, around a cubic yard. At the closest school to our plant, North Jefferson Elementary, our impact will be approximately 1/5 of the air we exhale. 1/5. And again, concentrations and worst case, maximum concentration and worst case scenarios. The United Nations World Health Organization sets a standard of 98 for indoor air quality, sort of in a typical room like this. So our plant impact is just 0.2% of that standard. We've also been asked about phenol and methanol. And this, as it's been said earlier, this state does not have standards for those compounds. The neighboring state of Virginia does. And for phenol, our impact is 1% of the limit in Virginia and 0.1% of that state's standard for methanol. Again, concentrations, maximum concentrations, and worst case scenario. The last compound I'll talk about is ozone, and here our contribution to the air is 1/60th, less than 2% of the ozone levels measured in nearby Berkeley County, which are 60 to 66 parts per billion. Now, before I go to the next slide, I've talked about several key concerns to air quality and explained how small our impact is. But I also want to share with you some real-life experiences. So this is a map of the town of Milton. And you can see the Rockwell factory up in the upper right. There are 2 circles around this factory. One is a 1-mile radius around the factory. The second is a 3-mile radius around the factory. In a 1-mile radius around our factory in Milton, there are 7 schools. In a 3-mile, the red dots are the schools, sorry. In a 3-mile radius, there are 24 schools, as well as our downtown, our local hospitals in the 3-mile radius. And just bumping up on the edge of that 3-mile radius is our green space, the Niagara Escarpment and the Bruce Trail. So we've been there for 30 years. We do not have the advanced technology like this facility will have. And we have never had an issue at a school or health within the community. In fact, I've worked beside this plant for over 20 years. Mark Graves, who will run the factory here in Ranson, has moved down from Milton and has moved 6 miles from the site. Before moving here, Mark and his wife lived within 1 mile of the Milton factory and raised their 3 kids for 18 years. We've committed to installing air quality monitors in the community. There's a picture. It doesn't show up very well on these monitors, but that's a picture of what an air quality monitor typically looks like. And we will collaborate with the community and stakeholders to ensure we monitor the right things and place them in the right location. Of course, we'll ensure they meet the EPA guidelines, and the monitors will be managed by a third party and the data available to the public. We've been asked about health risk assessment. You asked us to participate in an independent health risk assessment, and we said yes. As we pointed out, the existing and very stringent air quality MAC standards are already based on health risk assessments, and we envision this work will look at the existing assessments, our air modeling, and combine those things to assess the risk to the school children of Jefferson County. So we're committed to this work. The school board has also asked that we consider hitting the pause button on the construction until the health study is completed. We understand the school board's desire for an abundance of caution. However, we also believe the extensive studies and stringent standards that we have described create an ample margin of safety for human health and the environment. We are entirely confident that the additional reviews we are proposing will reaffirm the existing conclusions that our emissions will be safe for children. What's more, we also have an obligation in the community to provide the jobs and economic development we promised. However, if contrary to our expectations, the health risk assessment was to raise legitimate concerns, we will have the time to make any adjustments that might be required, even if that means delaying the project. With that, I'm going to ask Bjorn to take the stage and talk about our emergency response plan.
Thank you, Trent. Before I start, I would like to introduce myself for those of you who have not met me before. My name is Bjørn Andersen. I'm the Senior Vice President of Rockwell International for Coop Technology, meaning I'm responsible for our operations and technology globally. I'm Danish, so I apologize for my weird accent. I've been working 12 years around plants as a factory manager and as a plant director, and spent thousands of hours around the factory. I would also say to all the residents and citizens here, if you don't think what you say is making an impact, you're wrong. It is really effective what you're doing. We do listen to what you're saying. You might not believe it, but we do. And some of the stories I've heard really does make an impact. However, and I'm here today to present two topics, emergency risk management and emergency response management, which I also hope you will be happy about, because at least you have not seen the slides before. Before I go into the presentation, I would like to make some points clear that has perhaps been a misunderstanding in the public space. We do not have set designated storage facilities for neither phenol-formaldehyde or methanol. All the binder we use, we buy as a premix, so there is no separate storage of these compounds on our site, just to make that clear. With that, I would like to go into some detail, and I'll go to the first slide. The starting point of our emergency preparedness planning is a proper risk assessment that includes, for example, the risk associated with fire, explosions, and spills. And I would like to start with the main conclusion. There is no event on site that would cause an evacuation situation for schools and neighbors for the following reason. The only material we keep on site that is classified as explosive in certain conditions is our milled coal, where we have 2 silos. The coal storage system is a closed loop system according to the American standard called HAZLOC. And in the unlikely event that the coal silos should cause an explosion, the safety distance from that specific point of the incident would be 100 meters or 110 yards, which would not cause any impact on our neighbors or the school in question. In relation to spill risk, our tank storage facilities are designed as per the West Virginia above ground storage tanks, or called AST regulations. That means we are operating a 2-tier system to mitigate the risk of a spill being harmful to our employees as well as the public. The first way we mitigate is to monitor the tanks for leakages with alarms that has a system linked to a guardhouse that is manned 24/7. The second mitigation risk is placing the storage tank in what's called a catchment basin, I'm a little bit unsure about how you pronounce it, for filling the AST. These catchment basins are designed to have 110% capacity of the largest tanks. Should we experience the use of these catchment basins, the spilled material would be recycled in the process. So let me go to the next topic, which is the emergency response management. Again, I would like to emphasize the main conclusion first. That is that no event on site would cause an evacuation situation for schools and their neighbors for the following reason. The Jefferson County Fire Marshal authorities have signed out our response plans and confirmed that the county has the resources to address issues that could arise. Because this is an industrial facility, there are other requirements for more robust sprinklers and fire suppression equipment, and here as required, the State Fire Marshal Authority have approved our plans and equipment where variances to the standard have been needed. The main risk we have in our facilities is a fire in an electrical installation or in our process equipment. In all cases, there are multiple fire detection and suppression systems in place that includes the main tank farm. We have a fire water tank on site containing more than 200,000 gallons of water, which is enough to run our suppression systems for minimum 90 minutes through our own electrical fire pumps. In the event of a power loss, we have a diesel-powered emergency fire pump to support the same systems, and these can run for up to 90 minutes again. Finally, it's important to highlight that all alarms is connected to the guardhouse that is manned 24/7, and this guardhouse is linked up to the local fire services. So to wrap up, I would like to conclude that we do not believe any unforeseen events could cause a risk to the nearby schools and neighbors, so we do not see a need for the school to alter the evacuation route as a result of our facility. With that, I would like to thank you for listening, and we can now go to the questions you might have. Thank you very much.
Great. We look forward to whatever questions the school board might have. And again, we'll do our best to answer them. And if there are questions that we need to get back to you on, of course, we'll endeavor to do that as promptly as possible.
Comments? I'll start with one just based on what you just said. What about training of local fire departments and EMS services if there is an issue? What kind of training do you guys per se you're going to do, supposed to do, is required? I guess I would ask, what kind of training would be required? What kind of training would you do?
So Peter, are you able to answer that question?
Yes, I can answer the question. Hello everybody, I'm Ford. My name is Peter Reckenberg, responsible for U.S. operations. Do I stand here or?
Sure, please step aside for the camera's sake.
Sorry. The fire department will be trained in our facility in what the facility we have, how it's configured. We usually do that yearly in our Marshal County facility. We have our local fire department coming in. We show them around. So in case of an emergency or an event where they need to attend, they are aware of where to go and how to behave and what the buildings look like. They're familiar with the facility. The rest of the training they have already that is required.
So
excuse me, there's no comments from the public, it's just that.
Bjorn, why don't you come up to make it easier?
Sure. Are you guys aware that we have multiple fire departments that if something, in my mind, if something was to happen at the plant, obviously it would be, I'm assuming, just from the fact of the size of the plant, all alarm would probably go off in Jefferson County. You'd have multiple fire departments show up. So how would we ensure that, because I don't know maybe where else you've been, but in Jefferson County, there's one fire department and they have their own thing, and there's another fire department and they have their own thing, and sometimes they talk and communicate very well, and sometimes they don't. And so we would need to ensure that every single fire department and EMS and first responder was included in all and any communications. And I just kind of want some assurances from, like, how would we make sure that that was done?
Yeah, if I understand the question correctly, we would, in a situation, if something should occur, we will call the fire department and inform them what that situation is, and based on that, it's up to the fire department to make the decision on, how much personnel, how much equipment is required to deal with a given situation. And core, they have been trained and understand our facility, they will be able to make that call.
So is it your perspective that you would train all of the county fire departments in general to make sure that everyone had the opportunity to be able to get that training ahead of time? Because what I'm saying is, again, where you're located, you may get citizens, you may get independent, assuming you get independent. But yeah, the Shepherdstown would probably definitely show up. Plus, we also have pretty much a volunteer service in Jefferson County. We don't have paid firefighters. People get upset about even paying an ambulance fee.
So this is something we would have to coordinate with the fire marshal. That's not up to me to decide who's trained, but we can provide the training that you normally get by showing around in the facility.
Other questions?
Any questions? Do you have any?
I'll make a statement, but you go ahead.
I have a question about the human health impact study that you've agreed to. We had some conditions that went along with that, and we really didn't get much feedback other than, yes, we'll do the human health impact study. The first one was, we asked for a moratorium while that study was completed, and it doesn't seem that you've reacted to that. We've asked twice in writing now, and we haven't gotten any response. It really kind of doesn't sit very well with the community that we've asked you to do a study, you've agreed to it, yet you're still kind of marching forward with your plans. That is something I'd like to address. And then the other issue is it definitely needs to be an independent study and not a study that you provide. I hate to say this, but if you provide the study, it's not going to go over well. Yeah. I mean, we're getting conflicting information. You're over here saying, oh, it's perfectly fine, and they're over here saying we're going to die. I mean, it's we need an independent company, and not just an independent company, but an independent committee made up of various groups of citizens to pick the company to give the study. And the study has to be all-inclusive. It can't just be on the emissions of the smokestack. It has to be on the emissions of the trucks that are going to be coming through, the safety of the trucks. I mean, everything, where your waste is going to be going. I mean, it has to be all-inclusive. And that's extremely important, because if we don't have that information, I don't know, you have to prove to us that you're safe. We can't just take your word for it.
Sure.
And if you can't have that proven to us,
The good thing is that you don't have to take our word for it. Because in order to get the permission to operate, we have to comply with the standards that we've articulated, quite extensive standards, and that they are geared already toward protecting the health and well-being of the sensitive populations, including children, the elderly, and asthmatics. So there already is a great deal of literature, of studies that have been done, and our proposal is that we together review that material, understand better what the implications are in the context of the Rockwell Ranson facility, so that the school board and the parents and the community can be reassured. It would be necessary, of course, to work together to identify, and when I say together, it can be, of course, very broadly together, to identify appropriate, legitimate experts to do the kind of review of the literature that we're referring to in the context of the Ranson facility. I think Trent did address the question that the school board has asked regarding a pause in the construction, which we don't believe would be necessary or appropriate, although, as Trent mentioned quite clearly, I thought, that we would be willing to, of course, look at any results that were contrary to the expectations that we have, including delaying the project if that were necessary in order to address those concerns.
well, is there a reason why you wouldn't just hit the pause button right now until we can get that study done? And I'm not saying it needs to be, a year-long study. I have no idea how long it would take to get a study done. But just long enough, to get the study done, to give peace of mind one way or the other. Rather than just saying, oh, it's going to be fine and we're going to build it no matter what. That's kind of the impression that you're sending right now.
Well, we also would welcome a discussion with the school board, for example, on what the conditions would need to be in order to restart the project if we were to put a pause on. For example, what is it that would reassure, what would be adequate, sufficiently reassuring to the community, to the school board, in order to start up again? Because if we're going to pause, we would also like to know under what conditions it would be acceptable to resume. That said, we still don't believe that it's necessary to do that, just pause, because we are convinced that the project is safe. It will not cause any health risks to the children or the population of the community, based on the extensive studies and analysis that has already been done, based on these very rigid standards that we've articulated, that are taken as a point of departure in the health and well-being of the sensitive populations of the children, the asthmatics, and the elderly. And again, just to emphasize that if contrary to expectations, A review of these studies and a review of the Rockwell facility should show that there was reason for concern. Of course, we would take that very seriously, including being willing to pause the contract, the project, delay the project, in order to address and rectify any concerns.
Well, I mean, you keep saying it's within the, and I'm not trying to, poke you here. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of this. You keep saying it's within the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection standards. Now, are those standards like overall standards, or do they have standards for children? Because I'm not a scientist, this isn't my thing. However, it was described to us in one public meeting that we had last time, if an adult takes 2 aspirin, a child can only take a half an aspirin. So if the West Virginia DEP is saying, okay, this number is good, is that the number for an average adult, or is that the number for a kindergartner? And so, just because they say, oh, it's okay, we just need reassurances that it is okay.
We totally understand the desire for reassurances, and I would simply remind that the federal maximum achievable control technology standards and the national ambient air quality standards, which impose very strict limitations on emissions and the concentrations of those emissions, do in fact take as their point of departure the health needs and requirements of sensitive populations, including children, the elderly, and asthmatics. I'm not sufficiently knowledgeable myself about the West Virginia standards. Perhaps one of my colleagues could address that. Otherwise, we'd be happy to get back to you with more information. But from the federal standards are very rigid, very strict, and they do take their point of departure in the sensitive populations that we're all concerned about.
I think it's very important you use an independent group to do this study, and I feel that probably you should involve this public out here in helping to select that.
Thank you for that suggestion.
I have another question. Oh, go ahead, Artine.
Talking about the pause, you're continuing with the contract, but do you have all your permits?
I'll let one of my colleagues answer that question.
Yes. So we have, no, we don't have all our permits as of yet. We are still have 3 permits pending. We have our sewage permit, our foundation permit, and our building permit.
So I was just thinking about the pause part of it. Do you think it would be best to get the permits, pause it until you get the permits? That would be a little time, and then you're not spending money, in case the permits don't come through.
Maybe I'll
Well, I think those permits that Peter mentioned, we need those to build. So, yeah.
So there's going to sort of be a pause until the permits are?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, just for clarity, not a pause, but there's a normal process for getting these permits. There's a timeline, and we would apply for the permits at the time that's normally done. So there's nothing unusual at this point about the permits that we still lack.
Correct.
That's part of the normal process. So things go in a certain order of things. So we're not pausing the site preparation that's going on now while we're waiting for that to happen, because the contractor will apply for the building permit, for example, when the time is right to do that. Correct.
So you're saying the permits are an automatic?
No. I'm not an expert in the permits, but my understanding is that when certain conditions are met, the permits are granted. There are requirements to be met, and of course we intend to meet those. That's obviously our expectation. And when those requirements are met, then the permits should be granted.
Circling back one more second to the DEP, when you have a 200-foot smokestack, I assume that that's one of their requirements, so that the particulates and everything else kind of float away and disperse over a great area. Is that correct?
Well, I'll let Bjorn answer the question about the emissions technology.
It is correct that part of the design of such a plant, and when you look at what is being emitted from the factory, and you do the modeling, you also do an evaluation on how tall the chimney should be. And that depends on many meteorological things. How is the specific weather conditions in this place compared to another place? If you look at our plants around the world, and I've been running 2 of them in Denmark myself, amongst others one that is similar to the one we are building, at least the melting tunnel is similar to what we built here, that you look at simply what do you need, how high do you need to go to comply with the regulations. But it is a science to design how tall that should be, and I'll not pretend to be a scientist myself, but there's a science to that.
So it's possible that the impact study that we have that's looking at this specific area, not just, the general standards for emissions, that they might look at this area and see that we're sitting in a valley where you guys evidently have told Loudoun County, don't worry, no pollution is coming your way. Well, what's happening between the plant and the border? Is it just dropping down on Jefferson County? I mean, it's got to go somewhere. If it's not continuing to blow, it's not disappearing.
Yeah, let me make one thing clear. Emissions don't know borders. As CO2 emissions and climate change don't know borders. So, I mean, that is clear. When you do the modeling for the dispersions, you look at the methodological data from the specific area. So it's not a general model that you can use all over the world. It is actually using specific methodological data from this area. And it is using the last 5 years. I mean, I heard the word 43,000 hours, but does it mean in reality it means around 5 years? And that is being used then to see what happens at the worst specific time for those 5 years. What would then be the impact on the national, on the ambient air? And then you measure that towards what is called the National Ambient Air Quality Standard. And see, do you then fulfill those rules? And that is what Trent showed before, that for PM10 and for PM2.5, we are approximately 1/6 of what is deemed to be safe for the vulnerable populations, as Michael mentioned before. Then, because somebody mentioned West Virginia, there are certain elements that is not governed here, and that's why we then compare to Virginia. But you do use the local methodological data to do the modeling.
And we would be happy to provide more specific information about different of the emissions and their concentrations in different areas around the county. Of course, so you're right. We did provide information to Loudoun County because they asked, and we've been providing the same information, or collecting the same information, trying to formulate it in ways that are available and accessible for the population here. And we'd be happy to share that. We shared that at the open houses last week, and of course, we'd be happy to share that with the school board as well.
Because you're quoted in the newspaper as saying the insulation plant's impact on Loudoun is non-existent. I mean, is that accurate? Is that the information that you gave them, that it's non-existent? If the pollution doesn't know borders, I'm not quite sure how.
That's right. So we don't believe there'll be any impact in Loudoun County.
Okay.
I've got another question, if you don't mind. So if you guys can get us also the information, I know that you gave us information on the formaldehyde number from North Jefferson, but it's also been brought up obviously multiple times, and I have children in those buildings as well, for the other three schools, because there'll be 4 total. And based on the pollutants and the stream of pollutants and the way that it flows, it looked to me from those original maps that actually North Jefferson may be the one that is least affected than the other 3. I don't know that that's the case, so I defer to some numbers. I would like some on that, at least on that number. And that being the case, if we look at that and those other 3 schools are not affected by that at all, and North Jefferson is affected by that, then I think we do need to look at what is Rockwell's responsibility. If it is true that we look at these facts, that we couldn't build that school there today, which frankly, I can't believe it was built there when those of you who didn't live here, that was a major highway. That was the only highway. There was no Route 9. This wonderful 15-minute bypass to Martinsburg was an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on what tractor trailer you got behind, or how many hundred thousands of them went up and down that road every day. So that, to me, I think is a legitimate concern, but I'm more concerned with those other numbers coming across the street. And if, like I said, and that is the case, then what help are we going to get to move that school or not utilize that school in the way that it is, because I don't know that if we don't have that at any other school, I don't want it at that school either, so I need some data on
Sure,
that.
and we'll be happy to provide that. I think there's a lot of data to provide before the school board would even need to contemplate or ask itself that question about moving the school. I think really don't think that would ever come into question, at least as a result of things from the Rockwell plans. But of course, we'd be happy to provide additional information about the schools around the plans.
Now, at Milton, do the schools have monitors on them that assess the levels of what's being dispersed?
We've never installed air quality monitors ourselves in Milton. I'm sure up there, instead of a DEP, it's called Administered Environment. They may have some air quality monitors in the area, but we haven't specifically put our own air quality monitors in Milton.
That might be of interest when you locate the monitors that you're going to put out throughout the county.
Yeah, so I think it's a really good question, where should they go? So we'll make sure we get some independent expertise that everybody accepts that those are the right locations, the most critical areas, critical locations to give us a good read of air quality. So we will seek some independence and hopefully satisfy that we're not just sticking them anywhere.
We've gotten a lot of information from the public via email. Is there any way that you can provide us a list over the past, how long has your company been in business?
In the world, we've been in for 80 years. We've been in
Okay.
North America for 30.
So for the last 30 years, can you provide us a list of any environmental mishaps or outside of the regulations?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
I've got two more questions. One is about, there has been concern raised from our constituents about the current level of movement with the dirt, with the arsenic in the dirt, and how that may be affecting our students who are currently at the school right now. Can you give us some information on that?
Yeah, we can. I think Peter maybe could talk about our voluntary remediation plan.
I can talk about that. So before you can start moving any soil on a site like Jefferson Orchard, you have to enter into what's called a VRP, that's a volunteer remediation program, which is managed by Department of Environmental Protection of West Virginia. And we did that, and that entails that you have to sample the soil in a matrix or a grid that you intend to move. And then based on those samples, you have to test what are the limits of pesticides, amongst others. And none of the soil on the property that where we have moved the dirt already, at least partial, none of that soil was exceeding any of the limits that required, for instance, that we piled it, like you see, for instance, with Procter & Gamble. You see those big berms that they've built up, that stockpiling of and remediation of soil. It's a method of remediating soil. And that was not required because we found no soil exceeding limit, with the exception of, there was one point which was an old mixing station, we understand, and there was equivalent to 5 truckloads of soil that we removed to an appropriate landfill approved for this type of soil. And other than that, the soil is cleaned up and the soil is safe to move around.
And then my last question is about, when I look at that map, and again, we talked about the traffic and how that was at one time a major highway of tractor trailers. God bless our bus drivers, because they're amazing getting buses in and out when that was a major highway. We don't want to go back to that, obviously, to have to deal with those things. Like, when I look at that map, I also tried to pull up the West Virginia, Maryland, and Virginia 2025, or actually 2045, long-range plan for DOT. Are there plans, right now it looks like there's plans on to 480, which doesn't make any sense to me that you'd put it in Shepherdstown. It makes sense to me that that goes right over Route 9. So why would there not be an on and off access to the highway Route 9 that would take you right to 81 and we never have to see any of it? Is there a piece of that, or is it really to go to 480? It looked like it was like $4 to $6 million. I can't quite remember the number, but it was a substantial amount of money that was going to be put into road changes under the Rockwell name for that. And so I wanted some clarity on where is it supposed to go and what is it going to look like?
Well, I'm not really entirely sure whether this is going to answer your question. perhaps not, but nonetheless, this is the proposed or the envisioned truck route to the facility with a capacity of about 100 trucks to and from the factory per day. But down here, you can see it. I'm not familiar with the exact names of the roads. Maybe Peter, you can describe for them. It's not so
Yes,
easy
that's
to see, but
excuse me, that's the wheelchair exit at Bardane, Black Dog Coffee over here. And our intention is that the truck traffic will exit and enter via this, from the new line via this exit, and then come up over the Northport Avenue where the bridge is. That was shown on the behind rendering.
they wouldn't pass the school.
Right, but what I'm thinking is long-term, that doesn't necessarily make sense, but is there a plan? Because what is the plan, I guess, then, that Rockwell would have to get onto 480? It didn't make sense to me why that would be brought in at all, and why there wouldn't just be on an off-ramp onto Route 9, go to 81, get out, get back in, and never get on Jefferson County roads in that regard. So I wondered if somebody could shed some light on how 480 came into it and what that's for.
I don't know. I don't have that information about the 480, but what I can say is we have discussed this with DOH. The amount of trucks coming and leaving, what type of trucks, what type of employee traffic, bicycles, pedestrians, etc., and come up with the conclusion with them that this should be our preferred entrance and exit to the new line. I'm not aware of the other conversation unless someone else is.
No.
I just saw it on the long-range plan. I had no idea why it would be. That's why I thought I'd ask.
We haven't been a party to that discussion, so.
I understood at one time, earlier on, that the initial deliveries of your raw materials would come in by truck. But there was plans to put a spur on the railroad that goes right by there and have it, have all that material delivered by rail. Is that in the process or in the plans?
So, it is not in the current plan. So I think we've communicated that the plan is that raw materials come in by truck and the finished goods go out by truck. So raw materials, not very often, they don't come in like the product goes out. However, one of the attributes of that site is the rail line that goes right in front of it. So we're certainly willing to look at and consider and see if a spur works and lessens the impact. I made that comment to some of the people that attended the open house this past Thursday to Saturday, so we are going to look at that. It's not in the plans yet, but we will look and see if that is feasible.
Well, it seems like it would be cheaper if it came by rail than by truck, but I don't know where it's coming from, so.
Yeah, so I promised many people over the open house that I would look at it and report back to it, so I will.
I put some thoughts together before the meeting, so, and some of this will probably be a little bit redundant, but nevertheless, just as some points of reference, many of the folks that have spoken tonight and in the previous meetings, many of those folks have expressed the length that they have lived in Jefferson County. I myself am almost 78 years old and have lived here all my life. I've been all over the country, but I must tell you that there is no place like Jefferson County. I love it. I came back here, and I'll die here. And I'm proud to have 3 daughters, 7 grandchildren, and 1 granddaughter who will enter school, not this year, but next year. Of the 7, the last granddaughter of that graduated from Jefferson this past year. All of our family started, David Tabb said his family was 400 years, and maybe it was, I don't know. But my family started here in this county in the early 1790s. When Daniel came into this state from Pennsylvania, he established a mill on the Shenandoah, the ruins of which are still available. He also started the little town of Cabletown, which is a cute little, I always call it an English village. It may not be, but it reminds me of that. And the magisterial district of Cabletown is also that same origin. All of this is to illustrate that we board members are just as concerned about all these things we're talking about as the other people in the county, all these other folks that are quite concerned. So then now we get to the redundant part. Dr. Gibson has offered in at least 2 letters that, and I think they were actually requested by someone in your organization, in 2 letters that she requested 3 absolute necessities to bring both sides of the present disagreement to an equitable solution. I believe these 3 actions on your part have been offered twice in letter form and not presented to the public. First, to show an action to signal that the public, to the public, that you sincerely wish to work with the community. You have to cease the building process until tests have been agreed upon and are complete and available to the public. I think that's a must. These 3 things you've already heard. You've addressed some of them, but in the people that I've talked to, in emails that I've got from those folks, we're at loggerheads right now. We're at loggerheads. You don't want to give, they don't want to give. And that's not a very good situation to be in. So some accommodations have got to be made by both sides, really, but we'll get to that. In order to earn, if you will, these folks' belief in what they're hearing and what they're seeing, I think it was mentioned before that you need to have a group formed that will sit down together and decide on these questions that are up. If you don't do that, you don't have any credibility, and that's a problem now. You don't have any. They don't trust you. Good, bad, or indifferent, they don't trust you, and you're not going to get anywhere until they do trust you.
Do you think we can earn their trust?
I think you can if you sit down with them and work with them.
I'd be happy to do that. We've actually invited a couple of times, but then denied or rejected. But we'd be happy to continue doing that. Of course we will, sir. Of course we will.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and I hope these folks are willing to do that.
Certainly. Of course,
These are not dummies.
That's for sure.
So, I think you can sit down, and if you really want to do so, both of you can get together and solve this problem. If you don't, it's all going to blow up. I guarantee you that.
Thank you.
Sir?
I think, first off, we totally agree this is a beautiful place.
Pardon?
We totally believe Jefferson County is a beautiful place, so we're with you on that and everybody that says so, and a strong community. So we've tried tonight to address the questions raised by the school board. Stopping construction, moratorium on construction, we don't think that's required because we're confident in what this assessment's going to be. We don't think it's fair to the jobs we're creating, the economic impact we're bringing. However, as I said, if the unexpected happens and there is an issue, there's time to address it, make some changes, even if that does mean a delay in the project. So I think we've answered that question and the other ones raised. And it's very important that we seek stakeholder and community involvement in picking who do we pick who does the assessment. We said we want to participate. We didn't say we're going to do it and show you the results. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think both sides got to sit down together in this room if you have to, and talk this thing out. Otherwise, we're all going to be in big trouble.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before I forget, another aspect of the impact study also needs to be the water usage. I guess that's something that, isn't regulated by the Department of Environmental Protection, but I guess it's an issue.
Well, we'd be happy even this evening if you had specific questions about water. We'd be happy to answer them now if we're able to.
Well, how much water are you going to use and where is it going to come from?
So our expected daily consumption is, if I get it right, is 125,000 gallons per day. 125,000 gallons per day. That will be primarily from the city water supply, although it's reduced by the amount of rainwater that we're able to capture in the different catchments that we have. So our effort, of course, is to capture as much natural rainwater as possible to reduce the amount that we're taking from the municipal water supply.
And I also read that your sewage usage was just going to be typical sewage, and then there was another portion to that.
Right.
And what was that?
Right, so there's, from the processed water, so the water that we use in the industrial process, that's contained in a closed loop. So once it's into the system, it stays in the system. We continue to reuse it and recycle. There is some evaporation of that, and so we need to take more water in from either the municipal system or rainwater. For the water that's discharged into the municipal sewer system, that's typical things like toilets and sinks and from the cafeteria, but also the residual water from the process, the water purification process. So we take water in from the municipal supply. We have to purify it by removing things like lime and some other minerals because that gunks up the works in the machinery. That residual water that has a higher concentration, about 4 times the concentration of this, of mostly lime, I think, and other minerals that's otherwise in the drinking water from the municipal city supply, that gets discharged into the sewer system along with the regular household waste, if you want to call it that, the toilets and sinks and cafeteria types of waste. So that's what we were referring to. I believe that's what you're thinking about, is that residual water from the process, which is, again, it's just water from the city supply that's been purified to remove these minerals so that we can use it in the process without gunking up the works.
So it's similar to a water softener at a home, where that water.
We would use water softener, yes, to remove the lime in the water.
And so the water that's going back out has a pretty high concentration of limestone or whatever the minerals are in the water. Is that
about 4 times the concentration of what would otherwise come in from the city supply, and before the process, right? So what comes out is about 4 times the concentration of these minerals.
And that's something that the Charlestown sewer plant can handle? I mean,
we haven't heard anything to the contrary. But I haven't heard anything to the contrary. I don't know if there's anything in the.
No, it's absolutely correct, and I think you've explained the way it is. And no, they are aware of this. They are aware of the type of water that they will receive back, and they have not raised that as a concern with us.
I have one final question. Has anyone provided you advice as to what would happen if the Board of Education withdrew from the pilot agreement?
I'm not a legal expert, but I guess I can defer to Trent on that. But
We have, first off, we are trying to answer questions, gain people's trust, and we're working really hard on that.
And we appreciate that.
We haven't hired a gang of lawyers to see what the consequences. Nobody said they're withdrawing their support from the pilot agreement. Nobody has said they're withdrawing their support from the memorandum of understanding. So we haven't contemplated that in any detail or exactness. So.
What is the memorandum of understanding? Who is that between?
That's between us, the state, Jefferson County, and the city of Ransom. Did I miss anybody, Peter?
Utilities as well.
Utilities.
When was the memorandum of understanding signed?
We signed that just prior to publicly announcing the project. Don't hold me to the exact date, I would guess, say June 2017. Peter?
Yeah, June, July, up to and including October. There were several there. I believe there were 6 or 7 of these. We call them MOUs, Memorandum of Understanding, and they were signed in different periods between June and October.
And I appreciate your patience with us because we're trying to play catch up with everybody else, because when the JCDA came and presented to the board, it was all a financial presentation. It had nothing to do with your actual company. So
okay, that's fine.
Thank you for your patience with our questions.
We're happy to answer as many of them as we can, as promptly as we can.
But, I still feel pretty strongly, as Mr. Cable does, that we'll ask once again that you please put a moratorium on everything until we can get that impact study. I know you're confident, they're confident, we're not confident. I mean, it would say a lot. I mean, you're wanting this to be your community, and so in order to get the community behind you, that would just be a show of good faith to do that.
May I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
What would the school board's reaction be to the idea of engaging in a rather short order, but engaging with reputable, credible experts in the field who can be identified with help of the community, of the academic community as well, to help sort of walk through what the studies already are. I mean, to get a baseline, perhaps a clear understanding of what already has gone into the process of making the assessments, of making the analyses. Of course, we understand that the school board doesn't have its sort of built-in expertise in these kinds of questions, so that's self-evident, of course. But would it be helpful, for example, if in the short order we were to help to identify experts, perhaps from one of the universities close by, who could walk you through this process and help you understand perhaps the complexities that already are built in to the process of getting to the point where we are, which might help explain why it is we feel confident that there wouldn't be any real need to hit the pause button. But others, of course, can make that assessment. And that would be something if you thought it would be helpful, we'd be happy to help facilitate identifying, of course with input from others, on sort of certifiable experts in the field, of which, of course, there are many. Would that be of any utility, do you think, for the board?
Well, I mean, I personally would like a committee to do it because I'm not an expert.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we could together compile a committee, of citizens and whoever you need to find those people, that would definitely help. But I mean, like I said, we really want a professional study, independent professional study done on the entire thing. I mean, if you use 125 gallons or 125,000 gallons of water a day, is that going to change our water tables here?
We've been told on that one. I mean, we've been told absolutely not. In no uncertain terms, we've been told by the water authorities.
Well, the water authorities want to sell you water, so. So I mean, I just would feel much better if somebody came,
Sure.
because I'm getting emails from, a person that lives right near there who has livestock. Well, if they have no more water, they have no more livestock. And the farm's been put into the Protection, Act, and so they can't sell it off to build houses. I mean, it's very
Sure.
convoluted.
Actually, with all due respect, I don't think it's that convoluted. And what we need to do a better job of course, is providing that clarity. Because I think the concerns seem to emerge more as a result of incomplete information or lack of information, which of course can be provided. And obviously, we'll do our part to help ensure that the school board gets that information. Of course, we'll help with that. And from whatever sources are available, of course, to make that independent assessment that you're referring to, so it's not the water company.
I guess the thing that bothers me is that you talk about levels of emission and levels of risk, but me as a resident, as a mother, any level of risk, I don't want that on my conscience.
There's risk in every activity that we undertake. And the issue is about managing risk and keeping it at an acceptable level. There's risk going out in the sun, we put on sunscreen. There's risk driving in our cars, we put on our safety belts. There's risk driving a motorcycle or a bicycle, we put on our safety helmets. And the list goes on. So the risk is a fact of life. The issue is about how significant that risk is. Is it an acceptable level of risk? And what can be done to, of course, continue to reduce that risk. And our message to the school board is that when it comes to air quality, water quality, the health of the population, that there is no significant, or there is no risk that is unacceptable under the limits that have been set. So there's basically no risk to the population. Now, I realize, of course, you're skeptical about that, but and that's fair enough. But what we have to rely on is the best available science. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that best available science is continually reviewed because it continually evolves, just like technology does. And that's why the maximum achievable control technologies are reviewed every 8 years, because technology evolves, scientific knowledge evolves. But we don't see any significant risk to the health of the population from the emissions that will come from this plant.
But you have to understand our perspective, that's like the water company saying, it's okay, I have plenty of water for you. I mean, you're like, it's okay, there is no risk, or very minimal risk.
Sure, but
So-
that's also, but what we need to do, of course, to reassure you and reassure the community is not, I mean, we're not asking you to take our word for it. I mean, we understand that, of course, we're not asking that. But we are asking you to look at all the science that has been done already to get to this point, the science behind the standards that have been established to protect the health and the well-being of vulnerable populations, sensitive populations is the term that the EPA uses, including children, the elderly, and asthmatics. So the standards that we have to comply with, and that we're already very substantially below, are in fact designed to protect the health and well-being of these sensitive populations. Now, if we need to make a bigger effort, and of course we'll do everything we can to help the school board appreciate the extent of that research that's been done and the science behind it, to reassure you that there is no real risk that you have to worry about in terms of the health of the population.
But please correct me if I'm wrong, but let's say the EPA sets a limit here, okay? And the numbers that they're looking at, they're the numbers that you provided from your models and the permit that you applied for, is that correct? Not somebody that...
So, in one of the slides I showed the large blue bars which were the national air quality standards. So that's the limits the EPA has set after reviewing also. So that's the limit they've set. What our modeling showed, and maybe Michael has it. It looks better than it did on the slide. And so what our modeling shows, and this is worst case, as Michael said, Worst case, in terms of the volume of product we're running, every day of the year, 24 hours a day, our permit level is green. In reality, we operate much lower than that at our existing factories. So, is that the question? So the blue is what the EPA says are the safe limits for the sensitive population, and we're permitted at green. We're modeled at green, and actually, at worst case, and we'll actually emit less than that in real life.
I think what you were saying was that who provided those numbers? You provide those numbers to the EPA.
Well, there's very stringent rules for modeling your air quality data. So they tell you who you can use. They send it out to third-party consultants to vet that data and to analyze that data. But yes, we submit it, and then we're bound by it. But they have third-party people and that you have to use to do the modeling.
And we use the environmental consultancy ERM, and they were with us at the open house for those 3 days to help explain these questions or these issues to the residents who visited with us there. So it's not something that we do, out on our own. I mean, these are experts who do this for a living and do it professionally and are recognized as such for doing this. So it's not I'm not saying you're suggesting this, but it's not a sort of an in-house fly-by-night type of approach to it. It's quite extensive. It's quite rigorous.
I mean, we've been provided a lot of information, and that's why I definitely want the independent professional study, because my interpretation of it is I look at numbers and it's like, ooh, that's bad. Because this was provided to me about the toxic release inventory data, and how right now Jefferson County has in 2016 had 18 pounds for the year. And Marshall County, where Bahia is, was 532,000 pounds. And from what I understand, there were only 3 facilities in that county, and yours being one of them. So when you're going from 18 to 500,000, I mean, that number sounds scary, but I don't know
Well,
what it means.
Bjorn, could you explain sort of how those numbers are derived?
I can do that.
Thank you.
First of all, I can fully understand that when you look at those numbers, it looks scary, especially if you compare to the 18 pounds that is claimed, which I have not checked it myself, is in Jefferson County. I think it's important when you look at those data, and I think it is 2016 data you're looking at, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
In 17, the data is significantly better, especially on formaldehyde. Second thing is we did report on 2 substances that we were not obliged to report on, which is a significant part of those tons. Since I think it was Mrs. I cannot pronounce the name, but I think, if I'm okay to say Emma, she was so kind and pointed us to in this direction at the Shepperton's Town Council meeting, and therefore we spent some time looking at the data. And it is so that we have reported 2 compounds, and we are happy to share that information with you, that we were not obliged to report. So others might not do that either, so the benchmark can be a little bit off. But we are happy to provide that data, again, to have an independent, to actually look at if what I'm saying is correct, because I fully understand what I'm saying is not necessarily take it for facts. So we're happy to do that, to get somebody to say, yes, it's correct, you should have not reported that, and therefore you cannot necessarily not benchmark the data. What I will say is on formaldehyde from 16 to 17, the numbers dropped significantly due to us changing our binder recipe. And we will use the same recipe here in Ransom. Sorry.
And you said that the binder came pre-mixed?
Yes.
And so is that not a toxic material if it were to spill, or, I mean,
You know that.
compared to coming separately?
The binder is not classified as a hazardous material if it were to spill, and there is containment. First there's the warning system, as Björn explained, and then there's the containment as well. So it will be contained, and it will be captured and reused in our process. It will not leave the site.
But if it's I assume it's being delivered by truck. If the truck is in an accident, and, I mean, we had a tanker truck that caught on fire a couple of years ago, and, if that were to have an accident, you can't contain it. There's no, catch basin to catch that. Is that still a hazardous material or no?
It is not. It's not a hazardous material. It's classified under, for instance, on flammability as the lowest rating. So it's a normal spill that the authorities knows how to deal with in case of a truck spill.
Just to add, it is, I mean, you asked if there was a sorry, my name is Marianne Guldberg, some of you met me, so I'm from the headquarters as well in Denmark, responsible for environment and health and safety. I just want to point out that since the question was, is there a big difference? There is certainly a big difference to if you have, you know, which we have on some of our plants, we have the formaldehyde in a tank, we have the phenol in a tank, we have urea in a tank, and we react it. This is something that is a chemical reaction which requires specific precautions to do it in a safe way and also special things. What we do here is completely different because all this chemical reaction is done by the supplier. So there are small traces, very small traces of formaldehyde and phenol in the binder. This is what we talked about, to optimize with the supplier to get the most clean material. And there's a completely different hazard classification to this mixed and reacted binder that we get. It's completely different from formaldehyde, phenol, or the other stuff. Yeah.
And is that binder used in Bavaria as well as Milton?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I just think, you know, first of all, I want to say thank you to the community because I think they've done an outstanding job of, you know, making us aware, making the community aware. I want to say thank you to Rockwell because, you know, any of us who've run for political office, to sit there and listen to someone speak ill of you, even though, you know, they're very passionate and feel very strongly, and we all believe much of what they're saying. I mean, that's just, you know, I'm not a scientist and I don't fully understand that. And I think that you listen to that with a lot of grace, and I appreciate the fact that you've done that as well. I know this has been hard. I know I have seen Leslie at event after event after event, including the Happy Retreat event, and trying to be an investment in this community when you didn't necessarily have to do that. I've kind of gone back and reflected on Jefferson County as a whole. Moving here, living here, we've seen a lot of changes, and I think that what we're dealing with personally, my personal opinion is, you know, for those of us that live in Huntfield, they didn't want Huntfield, and it was going to destroy Jefferson County. When table games was referenced, there was going to be hookers on every corner. All of our children were going to become gambling addicts, and it was very intense, and I attended all of those meetings, and it was quite horrific. There was no Facebook then, so it was a little bit different than it is with social media today. But you did get a face-to-face with every single person who had every single feeling on one side of the argument or another. So I appreciate at least being able to have this dialogue. I think it's very important. What I think we're at now is we've not had industrialization of Jefferson County at all. It is a beautiful space. When I first heard the numbers that, I think it was Emma, I watched the video and I was very, very happy to have that because I live 3/4 of a mile from Halltown Paper Factory, and my house is built in Gap View on top of an arsenic orchard. And I never thought twice when I bought that house. I raised my 4 children in that house. I never thought it was affecting me in any way, shape, or form. I drive by it every day and smell it, and drive back home every day and smell it. Some days worse than others, but it just doesn't seem to, you know, I guess you get used to it. That being the case, I did my due diligence and I started looking at other places. I looked at Morgantown, where I sent my son to WVU, which the air quality is 1.4 million toxins. And then I got a little bit more freaked out, and I started looking where he's going to go, because he's a chemical engineering student at WVU. So he sits on that side of the argument and tries to educate me on why you have to have a 215-foot smokestack and what's actually happening, which I still don't fully understand, and I still don't necessarily agree with. But he's, you know, just talking He's moving 3.5 hours away for a job. He
got that job, and I'm proud because he's a Jefferson County kid who we push STEM, 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 STEM. And here he's done that. He's succeeded. He competed against kids from RIT and kids from Virginia Tech, and he won that job before he ever entered his senior year of college. So would I like to know that he was responsible in some way to make sure we're safe here? Yeah, that might have been a neat dream, you know, for him. He's happy to go 3.5 hours away. At the same time, I look up the pollutants where he's going, and it's not his company, but the company in the same town. It's the 3rd largest polluter in Virginia, and it's 5.5 million pounds in the air. So then I'm really freaked out, because I'm thinking, now I've sent my kid, who just took this job, making great money, but it's freaking me out. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I want him to do something else now with his life. I don't know. But so I just say, I love this community. I love that we're so diverse. I love that we all are passionate about how we feel. And to me, that's where we're on. We're on this precipice of industrialization or not. Because if that door opens for you all, who's next to come here? And then next, and then next. And I think that, to me, is the overwhelming fear. So I say that to say, I don't think, even though it feels personal, I don't feel like it should be personal to you. You guys are in this industry, you've been doing it a long time, you understand definitely some things that maybe we don't. As a community, though, we're gonna have to figure out what the goal is, yes, moving forward, and what happens moving forward, and what we want and desire in Jefferson County moving forward. Because clearly, yes, we do not feel like we had all the information to make the decisions that needed to be made. And that's nothing personal. But no, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't our fault. But it was frankly, I think, a hodgepodge of horrible PR and definite information that we should have been able to figure out another way. So I appreciate, and that's just, I want that to be said, that
We appreciate that very much, and of course, it's in everybody's interest to have as open and clear dialogue, as fact-based as possible. I want to appreciate Chris having reached out to Leslie over the weekend to engage in an effort to sort of bat down the falsehoods that are out there. There are quite a few that circulate. I think it's a positive step to work together to have a fact-based discussion. We don't take it personally, although sometimes it is personal, and that's quite unfortunate, because we do experience, even with many of the people who don't support the project, that there's quite a civil discussion, probably the vast majority. Although we do get shouted at quite a bit, also online, Facebook. Bjorn was called a Nazi propaganda minister online. So it does get personal sometimes, and we would appeal to everybody for civil debate and discussion based on facts. Different interpretations of facts, that's fair enough. But I hope we can all agree that that kind of sort of personal attacks, we can do away with that. That would be our hope anyway. Again, we're here as long as you have questions or want to discuss anything further.
I think the most important thing at this point is for you to just get with Dr. Gibson to figure out a committee to find the independent study, and we'll just formally ask one more time that you just hit the pause button until that study is completed.
Thank you. We will do that.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for all the citizens to be here as well. Second. All in favor? Aye.
Or what? Like if we don't go past 10:30?
Then we quit at 10:30 and go home.
But we don't finish the meeting.
We don't finish the agenda.
Right, but we pick it up another time?
We've
Maybe.
never not finished.
We've never done that
What
before.
the options are. Just ask what the options
We'll
are.
stay till we're done.
So-
we didn't leave here till almost midnight.
One night was 1:30.
1:30.
Mhm.
That's right, that's right.
All right, so we have in favor, opposed? All right. Madam Superintendent, do you have any comments?
There are no comments from the superintendent. There are no comments.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting held August 13th and the special meeting held on August 9th?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Citizens' comments we've completed. The consent agenda.
There are no changes to the consent agenda, but I want to give the board an alert to one thing that will be coming up in the not-too-distant future. Number 11 on the consent agenda is action on approval of contracted services for 2018-19. It has been our practice, along with the rest of West Virginia for many years, for us to have separate contracts with retired teachers to come back and provide services for us. As I noted a couple of weeks ago to you, the IRS has come and audited several school systems in West Virginia, and the information that they have conveyed is their desire to have these school systems switch people from contracted services to employee positions, predominantly in arenas where they feel like, if we contract with a outside company, like we contract for our landscaping services, they pay for their landscapers' benefits, they pay into Social Security for them, they pay into retirement for them. When you employ an individual and contract with an individual, they have to go and get their business license, of course, with the state of West Virginia. They're their own business. But at that size, they're not required to pay into Social Security and so the IRS sees this as a way that people are circumventing paying into Social Security and paying into retirement. And there's a concern that then those folks will need the system later on. So we anticipate right now, these are folks that we rely on to provide services for kids, and we have not been given a ruling from the IRS as to the direction that they want us to take, or their ruling about this position you can leave contracted, but this type of position you need to make an employed position. They have given us some handouts about controlling factors that they are going to use when they determine whether a worker is an employee or an independent contractor, and I will send the board copies of these. So it may be that we come back to you in November or December and say, the IRS came back to us and they said, of these 10 positions, these 5, they say shouldn't be contracted positions, they should be employee positions, and you need to convert them. But we'll give you that information at that time. Okay?
So do we need to make a salary scale for those contracted positions?
Yes, ma'am, that will be part of the work. And some of the interesting pieces of it that we've had the questions of, wow, we have people that because they're retirees, they only work a certain number of days per year. They only work certain days of the week. They only work certain. So we're going to need some guidance from them about how to proceed compliant with West Virginia law. Mm-hmm. West Virginia School Personnel Code, how we'd convert them from a contracted position to an employee position. Once they tell us who they, based on their analysis, they feel like shouldn't be contracted but should be an employee position, we'd have to create the position.
So it's based on the position itself. It's not the taxes or anything, because we're sending these people 1099s at the end of the year.
We are sending them 1099s,
So they're still paying
yes,
their
ma'am.
taxes and they're paying their Social Security. It's just that they're paying the employer and the employee
And the employee portion.
Then we have to figure out about seniority and who we have to hire.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. That will, that is going to be a significant amount of time and effort that goes into that, depending on how complicated the IRS wants to make it. This whole page is just the factors that they use to consider whether someone falls into one category or another. And
It's going to be a big headache.
It is the gift that keeps on giving.
Yes, sir.
And the current contract only states basically minimum number or maximum number of hours.
Hours per week.
Okay, so it doesn't state
It doesn't state we promise that we will keep you employed until June, 30th. So we'll be able to, when we convert those, and of course, we'll have conversations with those folks as we find out. I mean, we don't have any intention of those folks not doing the work. We need it. It's just, we have to deliver it in a way that the.
But we can do it without having to pay a fine, because we can do it quick enough without breaking a contract, essentially, is what I'm asking.
That is our hope. Now, whether or not the IRS comes back to us, and again, I don't know what the results of their audit is going to be. If they come back and say, these 10 people, we don't think you should have contracted them, we think they should have been employees, so we want you to pay us their employer share. I don't know what they'll do. I gotta be honest, but we'll come back to you and let you know.
Well, one of their triggers was if an employee had both a W-2
And a 1099. Exactly. That's what the trigger was for, and we let you know when the other counties started calling us and said, hey, this is happening. So it's not just us. Would that the state would step in and provide some guidance. That would be great.
Well, it might be just as easy with the whole thing if, and however many of those folks that we have, to treat their payment as we do any other employee, that they're, the income tax and the Social Security is just automatically taken out as they're paid for what, whether they're contracted or whether they're employee.
Well, I see your point, but then they become our employees. Like we only do that for people who are our employees, and we'd have to follow. I can't speak to the process that would need to happen in order for us to do that for a contracted employee. I don't know that legally we could have a contract with you and withhold something from you that's not in our contract. Like, we'd still have to redo the contracts, and the IRS will give us guidance on what they'll accept as a resolution to that and not.
In that case, you might have to make that a part of the contract, that,
So,
those two items will be deducted from your pay once a month, once every 2 weeks or whatever it is.
So
and filed with the feds.
So could it be just a difference of, instead of a purchase order, supplemental pay form that they fill out? Because if they're substitutes, then they're not gonna work every day, or they, may need to take off. So would that be the difference? But they would know at the beginning, like, how much they couldn't go over?
Right, and that was the thought of how we might be able to resolve it, yes, that we treat them as an employee and then have it as and again, we weren't sure what they were gonna call it. Are you gonna call it a stipend? Are you gonna call it supplemental pay? So that we meet all of their tax requirements, but we still have those time delineations of, you're not, especially for the large number of retirees that we continue to, and we need them to function. Right. They're fantastic employees that have decided to retire, and it affects their retirement. They can't do more than, the 140 days. So we have to honor and respect that too. So we'll, as soon as we get their guidance, we will come back to you. But I just wanted to put that out, because you'll see these contracted services on here, and I don't want to come back to you in 2 months and you go, why did you? It's because I don't know the outcome yet, and we're not willing to let kids sit without services for the next 2 or 3 months while we wait for the IRS to tell us how they'd like to resolve it.
Okay. So, do we have a motion on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Unfinished business? None?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
When
okay.
you said consent agenda, I thought that just meant the whole agenda. I did have a question on, this purchase order for a Barbara Rupert and Frank William Turk, $58,300 each. Just wonder what services they're providing.
I will find out for you.
All right, it was BAR, is that Barbara? BAR is the person who did the purchase order, if that helps.
Probably Bev Reinhardt,
Bev
which would be
Reinhardt.
special education. Okay, I'll find out. Might be, I don't know, could be an interpreter services, could be hearing, could be, I'm not familiar with them. Are they interpreters? Sign language interpreters? Thank you. Thank you.
And so they're contracted.
Yes, ma'am. We do contract sign language interpreters. But I'll verify that and email you just to make sure.
Okay.
Bids for demolition services at Jefferson County Transportation and Operations Facility Site.
Again, we've all talked about this, was basically the airway between the two buildings. The lawyers believe that they need to be separated and that the buildings would at that point not be together anymore. So there's a walkway that we've blocked off on their side. It's been blocked off for years. And they own now, UFP owns half of it, and we own half of it. And at that point, we would be getting bids to tear down that half. I'd also like to get an alternate bid, not to tear down their half, and leave ours where it's at. Tear down their half still, because that's what their lawyers want, for sure. And clean up all the debris, get rid of the debris, take it off the site, clean up the area, and seed and sod the area. There's also a little building that's halfway in between both of them. It's been sitting back there. They used it for like a waste product of their
Waste product, probably not the best term to use right now.
Okay.
Trying to use some of
I'm really just talking like,
In light of the previous.
They make pallets, so it's like wood shaving.
It's like, yeah, well, not the company over there, the
The yogurt company? The gelato company. Okay.
And it was more like anything, just leftover wheat and straw kind of thing. That's what the only thing that's in there. It looks like wheat kind of leftovers. So but I know that they had a direct pipe that went in there from the building. So we don't need it anymore. It just needs to go away. It's sitting right dead center of the property line.
So are they expecting that we're gonna pay?
Can we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Discussion.
Well, motion and then discussion.
Okay.
Right.
We need a second, don't we?
Oh, yeah,
She
she
just
said.
did. Okay, now discussion.
I'm sorry, does it have to be removed at a certain time? Like, are you on time
No,
schedule?
there's no time, there's no schedule for
And how long do you think it would take to remove it?
it. Depends on how much equipment they're bringing with them. You know, you could do it with a small group, and you could do it, probably take 2 weeks. If you did it with, large equipment and a large group of people, you could do it faster.
The reason I asked it, just thinking out the box, is it something that we could have like our drivers do when they're off, like during the summer? They couldn't be
No.
contracted?
No, this is something we want done before summer, but it's not, and it's also something that our drivers really would be, they would have, you're gonna need large pieces of equipment to take the concrete out. That concrete's not gonna come that easy between the two buildings. The little shed, sure, won't be bad. We did get a price from beginning, and I know about what they think it should cost, but then again, we took a couple things out of there, put things back in, so we're gonna rebid it, make sure we get 3 bids, and do our very best.
Then about what are we looking at?
Probably looking about 40.
So You said it's something that their lawyers want, is that correct?
Yeah.
There we go. So.
And our lawyer said so too, I mean,
So,
both
did we
lawyers-
negotiate that they get to
I
pay
believe
for it?
it's half, I believe is what Tracy told me.
Was that in the sales contract?
Again, I was just talking to Tracy.
Because we like the
Yeah.
thing. We don't want to demolish it.
Right.
They want to demolish it. Because I remember we actually did have some discussion,
Yeah.
because if
We
we
did.
take it
And
out,
we said
then
we didn't
water
want to
drainage
demolish.
was gonna be an issue.
Right. Well, it is if we don't cover it up. I mean, if we leave the top on it, we won't have the water drainage issue. But we would have had a major water drainage issue with, if we left, at one point somebody said, take the lid off of it and leave it concrete. If you do that, that water was gonna run into the building, you couldn't do that. But we could, again, leave the structure up and make it winterized and weatherized, so it's safe.
That sounds even more
our
expensive
side.
to leave half of it than to take the whole thing.
I don't think so, but again, it's just one of those things, we're gonna check as an alternate, we say to the companies, give me both prices.
And it's the insurance companies that are insisting
No,
on this?
it was
The
their
lawyers, but lawyers just don't
Right, what prompted them?
come up with ideas.
They were talking about just the fact that, if you ever sold the property, it would be an issue between the two.
Well, it's like a condominium, they're all
I
attached.
have to agree with, I agree with you completely. It wasn't, this was driven by the lawyer over and over. She said, we need to do this, and I said, yes, ma'am.
Well, is she paying for it?
I don't think so.
Once you take that apart, take it down off of there, Ralph, both of those openings will have to be closed.
Right, and they will be using.
Is that in the contract?
That will be in the contract.
Now, are we paying for the whole thing, or are they?
Again, like I said, it was, but to me, it'll be half.
It's half and half?
Half.
Okay. The other thing I want to ask you, we had a discussion here several weeks ago about the drainage, the water coming in on the floor in there, that needs to be, will that be done in there?
We can remedy that at the same time.
Okay.
My own personal opinion is we have their lawyers pay for it. I think we go after to say, hey.
It's not like we have $40,000
This
sitting
is
around.
not like our idea.
Yeah, we were okay with leaving it.
It's your idea, you pay for it.
If you really don't want to be a part of us anymore, we totally agree, and we will allow you to remove whatever you need to remove to make you feel better about this situation, but you need to pay for it.
It's fine with me. I mean, like I said,
I think they
I
might
can
want-
tell their lawyer.
It might be your first step.
I can certainly tell Tracy. Yeah.
It isn't gonna hurt anything to try.
Right.
I'm fine with it.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to get bids for a job that we're not sure we want done. So, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. All right, sorry.
Don't touch it. Doesn't hurt me, guys. I mean, like I said,
Just
we
maybe
will
find out and bring us back some more
Work from
information.
there, wanna do it.
Yep.
Okay.
We don't want to pay for it.
Huh?
We don't want to pay for it.
We'll try to get them paid for it first. If they don't, then it might recycle.
The reason is because if we sold.
They were
it-
fine with it when we sold it to them. That wasn't an issue, so.
Okay.
All right, action on approval to assign board representatives to standing committees. Currently, we voted on the EPIC, which was RISA 8, and that was Mark, and the Rumsey one was Gary. Those were the two that we voted on back when we were required to. So what's left, and if you need to add something, I have the cultural diversity, which is Laurie, the library, which is Laurie, the JCDA, which is now vacant because that was Scott, Parks and Rec is Kathy, the Extension Service is Gary. And I understand you're
I'm on it too.
on that too? But not as the school board
Right.
liaison
Member at
person, you're
large.
just member at large, okay. And then we had Epic and Rumsey. Ms. Harner, were there any other ones that I'm missing? Oh, the McCormick, and that was also Mr. Cable. So, and I had sent you an email asking if you'd be willing to serve on the JCDA since that was the vacant one.
Right, and I sent you an email back saying during the day. They meet during the day at 10 o'clock or 3 o'clock, and I can't come into those.
Okay.
I thought they were referring to Gary as being representative.
He filled in for Scott, I believe, when Scott couldn't be
I
there.
was the alternate.
Okay.
And you already have commitments during the day that you can't
Right.
do
Right.
that?
I know I can't be there I think it's the third Tuesday.
Yeah, it's once a month.
Yeah, yeah. I already looked at the schedule.
Would you be willing to be the representative, and if for some reason you couldn't be there, one of us could cover for you? I mean, 3 o'clock is just really bad for me because that's when kids are in motion in my world.
No,
Well, maybe
no,
if
I can't
Mr.
do that.
Cable could do it, one of y'all could swap out a committee with him.
Is there something that you'd wanna swap out? Would you be willing to
Never
do
thought
it?
of it.
Yeah, there's a couple that I would be.
If you can read mine.
Yeah, Gary, I could do the McCormick, or like I said, I'm
You can't do
already
the extension service, cause you're already on that.
right. Well, I could do it as they could switch me as a representative for the board and get another member at large, but
When is your
What's the
term
other-
up? Do you know?
I don't know. Do you know? I don't know when my term is up. And I was wondering, Laurie, if I could do the cultural diversity, since I'm
Yeah,
familiar with it for so long.
it does not matter to me. I'll do whatever.
Right, 'cause I know Laurie's on the library in the chamber. Did you put the chamber?
Chamber's not on there.
It's not.
Oh, that's what you sent me. Okay.
No, she's already on the chamber, but that's nothing to do with school board.
Oh, you sent it to me. That's what I was wondering. But yeah, I'll do cultural diversity and McCormick, and
That only meets a couple times a year to set it up, but that's usually 3 o'clock.
a couple times a year,
When does the extension service meet?
7 o'clock in the evening.
7 o'clock at night?
Mm-hmm.
Well.
So, let's do this. Okay, let's go around, pick one. We each have one committee then. I have libraries left. Mark, you're doing
Epic.
Epic. Gary, you're doing
Rumsey.
He's already doing Rumsey for
Rumsey.
sure.
And then you're doing culture diversity.
Or
Kathy, you're doing
I've got Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec. Okay, and then if we go around again. What was the second one you had, Mark?
Well, it was 4-H, but Gary was doing extension service.
Okay, that's right.
You wanna
So
do it?
there's only how many extra
It doesn't matter
committees?
to me, Gary, one way or another.
I mean, if you're giving it up, I'll take it, because they can get another
They can
person.
switch you out.
Right.
All right. So then I have Arthena doing cultural diversity, Laurie doing library, Gary doing JCDA, I'm doing Parks and Rec, Mark's doing Epic, Arthena's doing extension service, Gary's doing Rumsey, and Gary's doing McCormick.
So they
You've
get,
still got
what,
3. No, you went from 3 to 3.
2? Tell me what 3 are again.
McCormick, Rumsey, and JCDA,
JCDA.
the Jefferson County Development Authority.
Yeah, you didn't say JCEA.
No.
Okay,
Am I the
that's
only
fine
one
with
that has
me.
one?
I have one.
Okay.
Yeah, just.
I
we
can
go through
email
all
that.
Again, yes.
Okay, cultural diversity is Arthena.
Got it.
Library is Laurie.
Right.
JCDA is Gary.
Okay.
Parks and Rec is Kathy.
Mhm.
Epic is Mark. Extension Service is Arthena. Rumsey is Gary. And McCormick is Gary.
Okay.
All right. So do we have a motion on that list?
So moved.
Did you do vocational advisory?
Do what?
That's Rumsey, isn't it?
Rumsey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's Rumsey.
And Rumsey's Gary. No, that's separate from James Rumsey Council.
It is separate from James Rumsey. That's the one that Marty, you come in and meet with Marty Soltis and his group for.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm on that. That's right.
Yes, you are.
So do you want me to take that one?
It's okay with me if you want to.
Is it during the day?
No, it's in the evening.
Oh, okay. Well, that works.
That work?
fine. What day, is it a specific evening?
Whenever he calls a meeting.
Okay.
All right, so then add vocational is Lori.
I'll work around the time frame.
Wednesday night.
Yeah, if it's Wednesday, I'm gonna scream, but no, it's,
If it's Wednesday, we'll chat.
we'll make it work.
We'll figure it out.
That's great.
All right, so do we have a motion on the revised list?
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Finally, action on approval of agreement with the City of Charlestown for a prevention resource officer at Washington High School.
Yes, ma'am, you have on your board docs an agreement. I would like to thank the ever patient and vigilant Ms. Dougherty for coming and staying with us all evening. I'm sure he thought that his days of sitting at board meetings for 3-4 hours at a time were gone, but no!
The good old days, we went a lot longer.
Yeah, I'm having flashbacks right now. But actually, I do have to credit, I shouldn't say Pete, Mr. Dougherty, with our original partnership, which we started at Jefferson High School, first Prevention Resource Officer grant. Washington High School, however, falls in the jurisdiction of City of Charlestown, and Chief Kutcher has been working very diligently with us and worked through with his city council, and we modeled the agreement off of the one.
We're giving him our grant
Did.
so he's trying to model it to get a grant.
Yes, sir. So he's we pulled all the same information that we did for the Prevention Resource Officer grant that we got for JHS. That grant runs for 3 years. This is the second year of that one. We are trying to get the same one for Washington High School. We're hopeful that we'll get it in the future. However, at this point, we would be paying the salary portion. If the grant comes in, we'll split it with the City of Charlestown. They're paying all the benefits, uniform, the car, all of those are outlined in the agreement. We have all the same goals and objectives that we have in the PRO agreement that we have for J-High in terms of the classes, the outreach, the community involvement, and we hope that we'll have similar positive results. As you've seen from the discipline data, we've had massively significant decreases in discipline at Jefferson High School. We think in no small part based on having a prevention resource officer there.
So do we have a motion? Second?
Second.
Discussion?
When would it start?
That is a great question. When I spoke with Chief Kutcher, his primary goal is he has to be fully staffed for policing the community, and he is going through a hiring cycle. He said that he was very confident that we would be able to have someone for the start of second semester, like January. He hoped he could get someone sooner, but based on his applicant pool, if he has to send someone, whoever his like new replacement officer is to have full complement of officers, if he has to send them all the way through the training in the school and all of those, the maximum it could take would be until December, but if he's hoping he could get someone in more quickly than that. So worst case scenario is it's second half of the year. Best case scenario, I couldn't predict.
I don't want to speak for the chief, but he's just sending somebody to the State Police Academy to go through their certification. That's 16 weeks. So that person will be ready and fully certified by January.
The grant that we have with Jefferson High School, is that the $20,000 grant? And do we get that whole thing, or do we split that, or how does that work?
It goes toward the position, like, you know, so it doesn't come into us. The grant can only be awarded to the policing agency, so that goes to the sheriff's office. But the sheriff's office pays a substantially greater portion than the school system does. Right now, we pay 20, the grant pays 20, and he pays everything else, including benefits, which is considerably more.
You need to hang out with your buddy here in Charlestown a little bit. Show him the ways.
We try to do well by you.
And you do, and we appreciate it. So, yeah, because I was talking to Chief Kutcher, and he said when the grant comes in, we would split it.
Yes.
And only 10 would be applied toward our 60, and 10 would go toward his department.
That is what the city of Charlestown would like. Yes, that's the proposal. And again, make no bones about it. It is a less generous level of financial support from city of Charlestown, but according to them, financially they are less capable of bearing that than the sheriff's department. They are a smaller force, and let me just say that I'm trying to find, you know, it's been a politically astute evening, and I'm getting tired. But basically, like, Washington High School is less of a draw on their resources. You know, the sheriff's department was expending an enormous amount of resources to cover J High.
So we need to call them 3 times a day between now and
say.
the grant kicks in.
We get worse and more active, huh?
All right. Well, any other further discussion?
And I will remind you that with redistricting, we are moving, you know, every year more students from J High over to Washington High in an attempt to achieve that balance between them. So it's an important fact.
Well, and this contract is renewed every year, is that read it
Yes,
correctly?
yes,
It's
ma'am,
every
and
year.
it is written in there that should we not,
At
and we
any
were,
time.
and that was a point of contention originally. They wanted a 5-year, like, guarantee for, and I was like, we absolutely can't do that. Like, if we don't have the funding, if the state comes back and cuts us, and we're not gonna cut teachers first. I'm flat out, I'm gonna be honest about that. Teachers aren't going first, so, you know, talk to us, but it's gonna have to say year to year based on funding, so. And they understood that and agreed.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now I understand we have an executive session
For personnel. Yes, ma'am.
Right.
Thank you, Sheriff Doherty.
Thank you very much.
Chief Kutcher told me he was gonna come, but he had a football game. If he knew it was gonna be this late,
He would come
He
in.
got you. Yeah.
But I tried to be nice, even though I knew.
He owes you. You have a lot of witnesses. He owes you.
Splitting the grant, he owes us too.
Yeah, you betcha.
You've been here this long, you don't have to leave now.
I know. Shannon's like,